Chapter 31. Chapter 31. The Sea Restaurant. Vice Admiral Garp did it. Takumi had assumed that Garp had returned to Windmill Village to check on Luffy. But as it turns out, the old fox was back at Baratie early in the morning, carrying a net full of seafood. Zeph was outside with his cooks, repairing the deck. When he saw Garp return, he grumbled, "You're just in time. That guy's head is worth a few million berries. I won't even ask for more. Just give me 10,000 berries and take him away." Garp turned to glance at the stiff corpse nearby, scratched his head, and said, "Who's that?" Zeph, his face stern, replied, "That's Krieg, the captain of the crew that caused trouble at the restaurant yesterday morning." "Oh right, I remember now," Garp grinned, showing his teeth. "Not bad, Zeph. Even with a leg missing, you managed to take down this notorious pirate. Ha ha ha, still as tough as ever." "Zeph." Zeph sighed. "It wasn't me who killed him." Garp raised an eyebrow. "If it wasn't you, then who? Don't tell me it was Takumi?" "Ha ha ha. Yes, it was him," Zeph said with a grin, clearly enjoying the reaction. "Mako was here last night. He saw Takumi kill Krieg with 2 strikes, then invited him to join his crew." "What?" The smile froze on Garp's face as his eyes widened. "You mean Mako, the Phoenix, one of Whitebeard's commanders?" "That's right, it was him." Garp asked anxiously, "Did Takumi accept his offer?" Zeph shrugged, smirking. "Who knows? He's upstairs right now. You can ask him yourself." "Damn it. I was the one who invited that brat first." Garp threw the net of seafood onto the deck, grumbling as he stomped towards the restaurant's spiral staircase. Zeph watched Garp's retreating figure with amusement and added, "Oh, by the way, Takumi has Conqueror's Haki. I'm guessing you already knew that?" Garp froze mid-step, a look of shock flashing across his face. "Conqueror's Haki? That kid actually has Conqueror's Haki." Seeing Garp stop in his tracks, Zeph continued, "And I've got to say, that kid's Conqueror's Haki is pretty formidable. Just a slight slip of it, and he knocked out all of my men and Marco's crew too." "Garp!" Exclamation point. Without another word, Garp dashed up the stairs. When he found Takumi, he didn't waste time with words, immediately throwing a punch. Takumi used Soru to dodge with ease. Garp kept swinging. "Brat, you didn't agree to join Whitebeard's crew, did you?" "Takumi. Why aren't you answering? Don't tell me you really agreed to join that bird brain Marco?" Garp threw another punch. "No." Takumi was getting irritated. He wrapped his fist in armament Haki at level 3, decided not to dodge, and met Garp's fist head-on. The impact sent a powerful shockwave rippling out from where their fists collided. A flash of surprise crossed Garp's eyes. Usually, when he used his Fist of Love on Luffy and Ace, he only used 1/10 of his strength. Knowing Takumi was strong, he'd used 30% of his strength this time. But not only did he fail to land the punch, the brat actually matched his strength. It seems this kid can use armament Haki too. He has leg techniques that rival Zeph's, mastery of the 3 forms of Haki, and he's also a swordsman. How many more secrets is this kid hiding? Garp's interest in Takumi grew even more intense. The two retracted their fists simultaneously. In Takumi's mind, the system's notification suddenly rang out. Ding. Fought with Marine Hero Garp. Sign-in progress plus 10%. Ding. Sea Restaurant Baratie sign-in task completed. Congratulations, host, for unlocking Moonwalk and Tempest Kick, with rewards of Sora level +1 and Night Guy level +1. Current Sora level, LV3, Night Guy level, LV2. Moonwalk is one of the 6 powers, allowing the user to kick the air with such force that they can move as if walking on air. Tempest Kick is another 6-power technique, where a rapid kick creates a sharp, compressed air blade that can cut down opponents with the force of a blade. Takumi raised an eyebrow. With the new skills unlocked and the upgrades to Soru and Night Guy, a surge of power radiated from his feet. Standing still, without doing anything, the deck beneath his feet began to crack, spiderwebbing out from where he stood. With a loud crack, the section of the deck where Takumi and Garp were standing collapsed into a hole. Both reacted quickly, leaping onto the intact part of the deck, avoiding the collapse. Sanji, who had been secretly watching from a nearby building, was left gaping in shock. Eh? Garp was stunned. "Takumi, what did you do?" Takumi flexed his legs and shook his head. "Nothing." Garp's eye twitched. "I don't believe that for a second." Takumi didn't say anything more, calmly walking past Garp. "Where are you going?" Garp asked. "I'm leaving." Now that his task at Baratie was complete, it was time to move on. "What?" Garp was surprised. "You're leaving already?" Garp quickly followed, saying as he walked, Why don't you reconsider joining the Marines? Takumi replied firmly. Not happening. Seeing Takumi was serious about leaving, Sanji snapped out of his shock and hurried after him. Takumi, are you really leaving? Right now? Sanji asked, frowning. Yeah, Takumi responded casually. When they reached the restaurant's ground floor, Sanji quickly ran ahead, blocking Takumi's path. You said you'd teach me some leg techniques. You haven't even properly taught me yet. How can you leave now? Takumi. When did I ever say I'd teach you? Takumi asked, bewildered. Sanji hesitated, realizing that Takumi had never actually said those words. But I thought you implied it, Sanji said, feeling slightly embarrassed. Takumi glanced at Zeph, who was overseeing the repairs to the deck outside. You already have a pretty good teacher, he said. Sanji bit his lip, looking like he was about to cry. Takumi walked past him. Just before reaching the restaurant's entrance, he paused and decided to say one last thing. All blue is real. Sanji felt a jolt in his chest. He turned to look at Takumi, who was now walking away. Had he ever told Takumi about All Blue? How did that guy know? Wait. That night, Takumi had asked about his dream, and he might have mentioned it in passing. That guy actually remembered. It looks like you've made a good friend, Garp said, coming up beside Sanji, grinning as he watched Takumi's retreating figure. Sanji glanced at Garp, his previous frustration replaced by a smile. He nodded firmly. Yeah. Takumi reached the deck on the first floor. He informed Zeph about his departure. Zeph didn't hesitate, ordering his cooks to prepare a small supply boat for him. Looking at the supply boat, which was twice as large as his original small sailboat, Takumi jumped aboard without hesitation. He activated the system's navigation and set sail for his next sign-in location. He hadn't gone far when a voice called out from Baratie's deck. Takumi, next time we meet, I'll use the world's best ingredients to make you the most delicious dish. I promise. Garp's voice followed. Even if we can't be comrades, we can still be friends. Next time we meet, let's eat some delicious donuts together, Takumi. Zeph added, Takumi, if you ever have nowhere to go, come back to Baratie. At least here, I can guarantee you'll never go hungry. Takumi didn't reply or look back. He simply raised a hand in farewell. Zeph and the others watched him sail away. Just then, a cook came running out from the restaurant, looking panicked. Boss, something's wrong. There's a big hole in the second floor deck. What? Zeph's eyes widened as he turned to Sanji. What happened? Since only Sanji, Takumi, and Garp had been upstairs earlier, Sanji turned away, mumbling, It was Vice Admiral Garp who did it. Eh? Garp pointed at himself, laughing awkwardly. Was it really me? Chapter 32. Chapter 32. Loguetown, the town of beginnings and ends. Takumi sailed across the open sea in the supply boat he had taken from Baratie. His next destination was Loguetown. Opening his personal status panel, he took a moment to review. Name, Takumi. Age, 10 years. Sign-in location, Loguetown, 0%. Constitution, all attribute chakra. Haki, armament Haki LV4, Conqueror's Haki LV4, observation Haki LV3. Skills, fire release, Great Dragon Fire Technique, beginner, swordsmanship LV6, Shunpo LV3, Night Guy LV2. Rokushiki, finger pistol LV1, iron body LV1, shave, locked, moonwalk LV1, tempest kick LV1, paper arts, locked. Weapon, cursed sword Star Shatter, Lake Toya. System space, 100 by 100 by 100 cubic meters. After a quick glance, Takumi closed the status panel. When thinking about Loguetown, the first thing that came to his mind was the former pirate king, Gold, Roger. Loguetown was not only the birthplace of Roger, but also the place where he was executed. Thus, the town is often referred to as the town of beginnings and ends. The most notable landmark in Loguetown now is the execution platform in the town's central square, where Roger met his end. Given that Roger is an idol to many pirates, most who come to Loguetown make it a point to visit the execution platform. It's highly likely that this location could trigger a sign-in task completion. Once he arrived in Loguetown, Takumi knew that visiting the execution platform would be a must. As for whom he might encounter there, he didn't really care. As long as he could complete the task, that was all that mattered. Not dwelling on it any longer, Takumi picked up his gourd and happily took a swig of wine. Before leaving Baratie, Zeph had stocked him up with plenty of food and drink, so he had no worries on that front. After sailing for 3 more days, Takumi finally spotted a small island full of buildings on the morning of the 4th day. His next sign and destination, Loguetown, was finally in sight. After docking the small boat at the shore, the moment Takumi set foot on land, the system's prompt sounded in his mind. Ding! Congratulations, host, for successfully reaching the sign-in location, Loguetown. Sign-in progress plus 10%. Current progress 10%. Reward, beginner level divine departure, swordsmanship, armament Haki level plus 1. Current armament Haki level, LV5. Information about the divine departure sword technique immediately appeared in his mind. Takumi's eyes lit up. Divine departure was a sword technique used by Gold Roger himself. It involved launching a flying slash imbued with Haki at the target, bypassing the opponent's weapon to directly strike their body. This was indeed a formidable sword technique. Even at the beginner level, its power was nothing to scoff at. Satisfied with the reward, Takumi proceeded from the harbor into the town. Since it was still early, the streets were relatively empty, and many of the shops hadn't opened yet. Takumi wandered down the streets, but the maze-like layout of the town soon had him lost. Descending a flight of stairs in a narrow alley, he was about to ask for directions when he noticed a bar named after Gold Roger. Isn't this the bar that Luffy visits 10 years later? Takumi's eyebrows raised in curiosity. Without hesitation, he pushed open the door and walked in. His wine was running low, so it was a good opportunity to restock. Descending the spiral stone staircase, Takumi soon found himself at a small wooden door leading into the bar's main hall. Inside, the only person present was an elderly man with silver hair, who was in the process of setting up chairs around the tables, preparing to open for business. Hearing the door, the bartender turned and glanced at Takumi. Seeing that he was just a young boy, the bartender's expression remained blank as he said, "Get lost, kid. This isn't a place for someone like you." Takumi ignored the remark and pushed open the small wooden door, taking a seat at the bar. "A bottle of rum, please," he said calmly. Gold Roger had once drunk rum in this bar, so Takumi was curious to see how the Pirate King's drink of choice tasted. The bartender paused, surprised that the boy hadn't left, but instead sat down at the bar. Putting down the chair he was holding, he walked over with a resigned sigh. "Kid, do you even know how to drink?" Takumi nodded. The bartender chuckled. "And do you have money?" "I don't serve freeloaders." Takumi reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of berries, placing them on the counter. The bartender glanced at the money, then pocketed it without hesitation. He grabbed a bottle of rum from the shelf and placed it in front of Takumi. "This stuff is strong. Don't say I didn't warn you. A couple of sips and you'll be out like a light," the bartender cautioned. Takumi ignored the warning. He uncorked the bottle and took a big swig. Just as the bartender said, the moment it hit his throat, Takumi felt a powerful burn followed by a lingering, rich aftertaste that tingled his senses. Noticing Takumi's reaction, the bartender smirked. "How's that? Told you this wasn't for kids." Takumi set the bottle down, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "It's good. Another 2 bottles, please." "Huh?" The bartender blinked in surprise. "You sure you want 2 more?" Takumi nodded, continuing to drink. Puzzled, the bartender grabbed 2 more bottles from the shelf and placed them on the counter. Takumi uncorked them and poured the contents into his now empty gourd. At that moment, footsteps sounded from outside the bar. A tall man with short silver hair, 2 cigars in his mouth, and a large coat with the word Justice emblazoned on the back walked in through the small wooden door. "Old man, I'd like a glass of rum," the man said. That voice. Takumi turned to look and immediately recognized the newcomer. Smoker, the marine officer stationed in Loguetown. Smoker looked young, in his 20s, probably not long out of the Marine Academy. At this point in time, his subordinate Tashigi, who bore a striking resemblance to Kuina, was likely still in training at the academy. The bartender didn't seem pleased to see Smoker, his tone irritable as he snapped. "Seeing your ugly mug first thing in the morning is bad luck. We're out of rum, now get lost." Smoker, completely unfazed by the bartender's rudeness, sat down on the stool next to Takumi. "Business must be slow if you're serving kids. Looks like your bar isn't far from closing down," he said with a smirk, glancing at Takumi who was busy drinking. "Whether I close up shop or not is none of your business," the bartender shot back, clearly annoyed. "Now get out." "Ha ha ha," Smoker laughed but made no move to leave. At that moment, a marine soldier burst through the door, breathless. "Here you are, Captain Smoker. We've received reports of pirates at the harbor. You need to get to the scene immediately." Hearing this, Smoker stood up and left the bar without a word. As for Takumi, after filling his gourd, he finished off the remaining rum in the bottle before hopping down from the bar stool. Seeing this, the bartender asked, "Leaving already?" Takumi nodded, leaving the payment on the counter before calmly exiting the bar. The moment he stepped outside, a boy with a head of green hair styled like a rooster darted past him in a blur. Chapter 33. Chapter 33. Loguetown, Takumi's attempt to stay low-key. Was that Bartolomeo? Takumi didn't expect to run into this troublesome guy so soon. Bartolomeo was destined to be one of Luffy's most fervent followers in the future. Before turning to piracy to follow his idol, he was the notorious leader of a criminal gang that ruled over 150 streets. In short, this was a guy who was nothing but trouble once you got involved with him. Takumi didn't know where Bartolomeo was heading so early in the morning, nor did he care to find out. What mattered to him now was getting to the execution platform where Roger was put to death. Following the directions given by some of the townsfolk, Takumi soon arrived at his destination, the town square. Gazing up at the towering execution platform that stood several stories high, Takumi didn't hesitate to climb up. As soon as he steadied himself on the square platform, the system's notification echoed in his mind. Ding! Successfully reached the top of Roger's execution platform. Sign in progress plus 10%. Current progress 20%. Reward: Master Level Divine Departure Skill. Immediately, more advanced knowledge about the Divine Departure technique flooded Takumi's mind. Before he had a chance to fully process it, a loud voice called up from below. "Hey! You up there, kid. Get down from there right now. This is a special execution platform under the jurisdiction of the world government. If you don't want to be arrested, get down immediately." Looking down from the platform, Takumi saw a marine soldier with a loudspeaker shouting up at him. A crowd of townspeople had already started to gather. "Look, there's a kid up on the execution platform." "Who is he?" "I don't know, never seen him before. How did he even get up there?" The crowd buzzed with speculation. Takumi had no intention of drawing too much attention to himself. Although he could easily jump down from this height, to an ordinary person, it would be impossible for a 10-year-old to make such a jump without injury. To avoid causing a scene, he opted to climb down slowly using the iron supports on the side of the platform. Just as he was making his way down, Smoker happened to be returning along the main street with a group of Marines, escorting a gang of recently captured pirates. Noticing Takumi climbing down the execution platform, Smoker paused, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Isn't that the kid from the bar?" But it was this brief moment of distraction that gave one of the captured pirates an opportunity. A small handgun slid out of the pirate's sleeve, and with a wicked grin, he fired a shot at Smoker. Smoker reacted instantly, sidestepping the bullet and swiftly disarming the pirate. Meanwhile, the square erupted in cries of alarm. "Oh no, that kid's going to die. Somebody save him. Someone help that boy." Smoker followed the cries and saw the bullet heading straight for Takumi. Even with his devil fruit powers, there was no way he could stop it in time. Takumi was exasperated as he watched the bullet rapidly close in on him. Dodging it would be easy, but if he avoided it, the bullet would likely strike the platform, possibly causing it to collapse. Given that he was still about 10 meters above the ground, a normal child would either be seriously injured or worse if they fell. If he landed unharmed, it would definitely draw even more attention. But if he simply blocked the bullet, the result would be the same. Everyone would be focused on him. He wanted to stay low-key, but fate seemed determined to deny him that. Resigned, Takumi gripped the iron support with one hand and wrapped the other in armament Haki. In full view of everyone, he effortlessly caught the speeding bullet in his hand. The square fell silent. A few seconds later, the crowd erupted in disbelief. "What? No way. That's impossible. Oh my god, did that kid just catch a bullet with his bare hand? That bullet has to be fake. No one can catch a real bullet and be fine." "No, it's not fake. I heard the gunshot. It's definitely real." The pirate who had fired the shot was drenched in cold sweat, muttering in disbelief. "How is this possible? That bullet was specially crafted to be several times more powerful than a regular one. Who the hell is that kid?" Smoker stared at Takumi's hand, which had returned to normal after the catch, his mind reeling. Did that kid just use armament Haki? Still hanging from the iron support, Takumi had inadvertently become the center of attention in the square. Since he was already exposed, there was no point in pretending anymore. He released his grip and leaped from the 10-meter height, landing gracefully on the ground. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a boy with a spiky rooster haircut in the crowd, staring at him with wide-eyed excitement. "Huh! Bartolomeo? What's he doing here?" Takumi felt a bad premonition creeping in. Without hesitating, he quickly headed off in the direction with the fewest people. Smoker watched as Takumi made his escape. He ordered his still-stunned subordinates to take the captured pirates back to the base, then hurriedly followed Takumi. That kid is no ordinary person. I need to find out who he really is. Takumi, knowing Smoker was after him, deliberately headed into the maze-like alleys of the town. As expected, it wasn't long before he lost Smoker. I was too conspicuous earlier. From now on, I need to keep a low profile. Takumi wasn't keen on being the center of attention everywhere he went. As he pondered where to head next, his eyes fell upon a weapon shop. Isn't this the shop where Zoro buys his swords 10 years later? Looks like I've stumbled across it by accident. If memory serves, the cursed sword Sandai Kitetsu and the quality blade Yubashiri are both in this shop. Since I'm already here, I might as well take a look. With that thought, Takumi walked into the weapon shop without hesitation. What the, just a kid? The shop owner, Ipponmatsu, had been ready to greet a customer with a smile, but his expression quickly soured when he saw that it was just a child. Grumbling to himself, he turned back to his work. Takumi's gaze swept over the weapons displayed on the walls before landing on 3 barrels in the corner filled with swords. Noticing Takumi's interest in the cheap swords, Ipponmatsu spoke impatiently. Those swords in the barrels are the cheapest ones we've got, 50,000 berries each. If you've got the money, pick one, but if you don't, then get lost. Ignoring him, Takumi walked over to the barrels, ready to dig out the Sandai Kitetsu for a closer look. But just as he reached the barrels, a tall, slender figure passing by the shop's entrance caught his eye. Sensing someone's gaze, the person outside the shop paused and glanced inside. Their eyes met. The man had long, silver-white hair, a matching beard, glasses, and a long scar running vertically across his right eye. There was no mistaking it. It was Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King. Chapter 34. Chapter 34. Loguetown, Silver's Rayleigh's Drinking Challenge. Silver's Rayleigh, known as the Dark King, was the former first mate of the Roger Pirates, often referred to as the right hand of the Pirate King. After the Roger Pirates disbanded, hadn't he settled in the Sabaody Archipelago as a coding mechanic? So why was he here in Loguetown? Takumi didn't have much time to ponder the question, as Rayleigh suddenly turned around and entered the weapon shop. Ipponmatsu, the shop owner, initially looked pleased to see a customer, but his smile quickly vanished when he noticed Rayleigh's tattered appearance. The white hooded cloak he wore was riddled with holes, making him look like someone with no money. What's with today? Just opened, and already attracting broke people. Hey, old man, do you even have money to spend? Ipponmatsu grumbled. Rayleigh smiled warmly. Can't I just take a look even if I don't have money? With that, Rayleigh made his way over to where Takumi was standing. Takumi thought to himself, is this guy coming over to talk to me? He decided to ignore Rayleigh. Turning his attention back to the barrels of swords, Takumi continued to rummage through them. There it is. Takumi finally pulled out a sword with a plain design, a small piece of white cloth tied to the hilt, with a cross-shaped guard and a simple sharkskin grip. As he drew the blade from the scabbard, Ipponmatsu, who had been grumbling just moments ago, suddenly tensed up. Even Rayleigh, who had just reached Takumi's side, raised an eyebrow in surprise. Is that Sandai Kitetsu? Takumi silently drew the blade, casually swinging it a couple of times. A chilling aura seeped through the hilt into his body. Even though nothing had happened, Takumi could almost smell a faint scent of blood in the air. He could even feel the blade trying to erode his consciousness. As expected of a cursed sword. Interesting. Takumi's lips curled into a faint smile as he sheathed the blade and tossed the Sandai Kitetsu back into the barrel. Rayleigh, noticing the wooden sword hanging from Takumi's waist, chuckled. If I'm not mistaken, the sword you just handled is Sandai Kitetsu. Despite its curse, it's still a fine blade. Aren't you going to buy it? I don't have any money, Takumi replied bluntly. He had already spent the last of his funds on those 3 bottles of liquor at the bar earlier. Ha ha ha, Rayleigh laughed heartily. What a pity. I'm broke too. Otherwise, a sword like that, even if I didn't use it, would make a nice piece for my collection. Hey, old man. Rayleigh called out to Ipponmatsu, how much are those swords in the barrel? Ipponmatsu swallowed hard, his face turning pale as he replied, 50,000 berries each. But I'm not selling the one you were just looking at. Not for sale? That's a shame, Rayleigh said, pretending to be disappointed. If that blade were for sale at 50,000 berries, I'd definitely come back for it when I have the money. Takumi shot Rayleigh a skeptical glance. Would this guy, who was notorious for gambling away his money and drinking excessively, really save up to buy a sword he wouldn't even use? The answer was obvious. Absolutely not. Takumi didn't believe a word Rayleigh said. However, Ipponmatsu seemed rattled by Rayleigh's comment, his face growing even paler. That sword is cursed. Many who have wielded a kitetsu blade have met tragic ends. Nowadays, no swordsman dares to use a kitetsu. Even if someone unaware of its curse tried to use it, they'd soon vanish from the world as if they'd been cursed. So no matter how much money you have, I won't sell it. If you died, I'd be responsible for your deaths. Then why did you keep Sandai Kitetsu in the barrel for sale? Rayleigh asked curiously. Grabbing his hair in frustration, Ipponmatsu explained, I've been trying to get rid of that cursed sword, but now I'm scared that whoever buys it will end up dead. I can't be an accessory to murder. This sword is no longer for sale. I don't care if it sits in storage for the rest of my life, it's too dangerous to sell. As he spoke, Ipponmatsu quickly retrieved the Sandai Kitetsu from the barrel and clutched it tightly in his arms. Takumi and Rayleigh exchanged a silent glance, both at a loss for words. Rayleigh suddenly burst out laughing. Haha, what an interesting shop owner. Takumi, on the other hand, silently left the shop. Seeing Takumi leave, Rayleigh didn't linger either and followed him out. Hey, kid, wait a second. Do you know who I am? Rayleigh asked. Takumi shook his head. No. Rayleigh wasn't convinced. The way you looked at me in the shop, it was obvious you recognized me. Takumi said nothing. Rayleigh continued, It's been 5 years since I last visited Loguetown. I must say, I've missed this place. It hasn't changed much. Takumi ignored him and kept walking. Rayleigh, undeterred, added, You know, there's a certain kid who reminds me of you. His name is Takumi, right? Takumi froze in his tracks and turned to face Rayleigh. How does this guy know my name? Could it be that someone told Rayleigh about him on the way to Loguetown? Seeing Takumi's surprised expression, Rayleigh smirked. No need to guess. I ran into Shanks on my way here. He's the one who told me about you. He also mentioned that I should keep an eye out for you because you'd be full of surprises. Takumi was speechless. Of course it made sense. Shanks had been an apprentice on Roger's ship, and Rayleigh was the first mate. It was only natural for Shanks to mention him to Rayleigh when they crossed paths. Hey kid, Rayleigh said, eyeing the gourd hanging at Takumi's waist. Do you still have any of that liquor? Takumi didn't reply. Haha, don't worry, I'm not trying to take your booze. I know a good bar around here. How about we go and grab a drink together? Rayleigh offered with a grin. A drink, huh? That didn't sound so bad. Takumi hesitated for a moment. Rayleigh, noticing the hesitation, patted Takumi on the back and started walking. Shanks told me you can hold your liquor pretty well. Let's see how you fare against me. What do you say? Takumi found himself reluctantly following Rayleigh down the street. Not long after they left the alley, Bartolomeo, the boy with the green mohawk, appeared at Ipponmatsu's weapon shop. Hey, aren't you Bartolomeo from the next street over? Ipponmatsu exclaimed in shock upon seeing him. Bartolomeo, holding a spiked club, smirked wickedly. Hand over the sword that kid was looking at earlier. Huh? What sword? I don't know what you're talking about. Ipponmatsu tried to play dumb. Bartolomeo smashed the shop's counter with his club, his tone menacing. This is your last chance. If you don't give me that sword, I'll smash your shop to pieces. Okay, I'll get it. Just don't wreck the place. Ipponmatsu, terrified, hurried to the back to fetch the sword. Initially, he considered giving Bartolomeo a random blade to get rid of him. But Bartolomeo's voice boomed from outside, If you try to fool me with a fake, I'll gut you. Ipponmatsu was petrified. Bartolomeo was a notorious thug, feared by everyone in the neighborhood. Even the Marines had trouble dealing with him. If he didn't comply, Bartolomeo might really kill him. With a heavy heart, Ipponmatsu decided to hand over the Sandai Kitetsu. After all, he had always wanted to get rid of that cursed blade. Let this little tyrant take it. No one would care if he died anyway. Bartolomeo left the shop with the sword in hand. As he walked through the alley, he couldn't stop thinking about the scene where Takumi had caught the bullet with his bare hand. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. He had made up his mind. He would use this sword as a bargaining chip to convince that powerful kid to join his gang. Chapter 35. Loguetown. Let's compete, Takumi. Under Rayleigh's enthusiastic invitation, Takumi half-heartedly followed him to a certain tavern. Looking at the familiar bartender cleaning the counter, Takumi couldn't help but feel a sense of exasperation. Indeed, Rayleigh had brought him back to the very tavern where he had bought rum earlier. Kid, why are you here, AG? the bartender began, but his gaze quickly shifted from Takumi to the hooded figure who had walked in with him. Rayleigh removed his hood and smiled. It's been a while, hasn't it, old friend? The bartender's eyes widened in surprise. Rayleigh? Is that you? Rayleigh, it's been years since you last came to Loguetown, hasn't it? Yes, it's been 5 years, Rayleigh replied as he and Takumi sat down at the bar. The bartender immediately poured him a glass of rum, his eyes glistening with emotion. You've come back to Loguetown for that, haven't you? Rayleigh downed the rum in one gulp, wiped his mouth and smiled. That's right. It's almost Roger's death anniversary. I'm here to remember him. Ah, is it really okay to say that so openly? The bartender glanced worriedly at Takumi. Rayleigh waved his hand dismissively. It's fine. This kid can be trusted. Eh? You know this kid? The bartender asked, surprised. Rayleigh glanced at Takumi and smiled. We only met today, but I trust Shanks' judgment. He wouldn't have chosen wrong. Takumi remained silent, feeling a bit out of place. So, are you just going to let me sit here and watch you drink? Rayleigh paused, then burst out laughing. Haha. Bartender, bring out more drinks, and put it all on my tab. Right away, the bartender nodded, placing several bottles of liquor on the counter. The unlikely pair, an old man and a young boy, soon started drinking heartily, enjoying themselves as they gulped down the alcohol. As noon approached, Rayleigh noticed the empty tavern and asked curiously, Takumi and I have been drinking here for hours. Why hasn't anyone else come in? The bartender sighed, waving his hand dismissively. Ever since Roger's death, business here has been in decline. People in town avoid my place because of its name. Only pirates who admired Roger used to come by. But recently, even they've stopped showing up, especially after a marine officer named Smoker was stationed here. As he spoke, a cloud of melancholy seemed to settle over the bartender. Rayleigh fell silent, staring at the man for a long time. Then suddenly, he burst out laughing again. He was about to clap Takumi on the shoulder when Takumi instinctively shifted, dodging the gesture. A flash of surprise crossed Rayleigh's eyes, but he withdrew his hand and smiled. Kid, do you have any plans this afternoon? Takumi eyed him warily and shook his head. Rayleigh grinned widely. Since you're free, how about joining me for a little hunt? Takumi gave him a puzzled look. Hunt? What is this guy up to now? Then again, going hunting with Rayleigh might trigger a sign-in-progress task. Without further thought, Takumi nodded. All right. Rayleigh turned to the bartender. I'll pay for the drinks later tonight. The bartender quickly waved him off. No need. I couldn't possibly charge you. Consider this round on the house. Rayleigh chuckled and stood up. Let's go, Takumi. Takumi agreed, hopping off the bar stool and following Rayleigh out of the tavern. The two made their way to the busiest street in Loguetown. Gazing at the bustling crowd, Rayleigh grinned. Loguetown is the closest town to the Grand Line. Takumi, you're planning to head there next, right? Takumi nodded curtly. Yes. Rayleigh continued, I met Shanks at the entrance to the Grand Line. Back then, he couldn't stop singing your praises. I thought he was exaggerating, but now I realize I was wrong. You might be even more talented than I imagined. Takumi blinked, confused by Rayleigh's sudden shift in conversation. What are you talking about? Rayleigh smiled. From the moment I first saw you, I noticed that you were different. The wooden sword you carry suggests you're a swordsman. A powerful swordsman's greatest asset is a heart that remains calm amidst all things. Over the years, I've met many people and fought against powerful swordsmen, but few possess a heart that is truly at peace. Among them, you're the youngest with the greatest potential to become a master swordsman. Takumi was unsure of how to respond. And? Rayleigh chuckled. Shanks said you've awakened all 3 types of Haki and that you're quite skilled with them. If that's true, then you truly are a little monster. Takumi sighed in exasperation. What's your point? Rayleigh's smile softened. I can see that you're someone who longs for freedom. Being a traveler is a good choice, but the future is full of unknowns, events, challenges, people. Staying true to yourself and living the life you want is difficult, but I hope you can do it. What on earth is Rayleigh trying to accomplish here? Takumi was beginning to regret agreeing to go hunting with him. Noticing Takumi's exasperation, Rayleigh burst out laughing. Haha. I got a little carried away. So, how about this? Let's have a little competition, Takumi. Let's see who can catch more wanted criminals. If you win, I'll grant you a favor. If I win, you treat me to a good drink. How about it? It seemed like no matter the outcome, Takumi wouldn't lose. So what's the point of this bet? Takumi couldn't understand Rayleigh's motive. Still, after thinking it over, he figured there was no harm in going along with it. Besides, he was running low on money. Catching a few bounty targets to exchange for berries at the marine base was a quick way to earn cash. With that in mind, Takumi nodded, accepting the challenge. Rayleigh grinned. Then let's set a 2-hour limit. After 2 hours, we'll meet back here and see who's caught the most. All right, Takumi agreed. Then let's begin, Rayleigh declared. And with a flash, he disappeared from sight. Takumi's eyes widened. So fast. He hadn't even seen Rayleigh move. As expected of the Dark King Rayleigh. His reputation was well-deserved. All right, in that case, it's time for me to get started. Takumi immediately quickened his pace, first finding a few wanted posters. With the help of his observation Haki, he swiftly captured his targets. Within just 1 hour, he had already caught 5 wanted criminals. As he was closing in on his 6th target, ready to strike, a loud explosion suddenly echoed from the direction of the port. Chapter 36. Chapter 36. Loguetown. Takumi gets noticed. Takumi had no interest in the commotion at the port. His focus was solely on capturing more bounty targets and beating Rayleigh. Since he had accepted the challenge, losing wasn't an option. However, the 6th bounty target he was tracking had unfortunately merged with the crowd heading toward the explosion at the port. Without hesitation, Takumi followed. As he blended into the crowd, getting closer to his target and preparing to strike, Rayleigh suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Right in front of Takumi, he swiftly knocked the target unconscious. In a flash, Rayleigh had grabbed the man and disappeared into the crowd with lightning speed. Before he vanished, Rayleigh shot Takumi a cheeky grin. Takumi was left speechless. He did that on purpose. Rayleigh definitely did that on purpose. With no other option, Takumi started searching for a new target. As he turned to leave, his gaze landed on a small alleyway. There, he spotted a familiar figure, Bartolomeo, clutching a sword as he looked around, seemingly searching for something. Takumi's eyes locked onto the sword Bartolomeo was holding. Isn't that the Sandai Kitetsu? How did it end up in his hands? Before Takumi could process this, Bartolomeo noticed him. Their eyes met. Bartolomeo's expression quickly turned from surprise to excitement. Takumi sighed internally. As expected, that guy was looking for him. Seeing Bartolomeo approaching, Takumi wasted no time. He quickly darted away through the crowd, hoping to avoid getting entangled with Bartolomeo. But no matter how fast Takumi was, in the unfamiliar streets of Loguetown, he soon found himself cornered in a narrow alley by none other than Bartolomeo. Bartolomeo, holding the Sandai Kitetsu, blocked Takumi's path with an eager grin. Finally! I've been looking everywhere for you, the guy who caught that bullet with his bare hands. Takumi didn't respond. Bartolomeo, with a grand gesture, extended the Sandai Kitetsu toward him. I noticed you seemed really interested in this sword at the shop earlier. You can have it. Takumi glanced at the Sandai Kitetsu that Bartolomeo was offering him. Once again, he was speechless. When had he ever shown that he was so attached to this cursed blade? Seeing Takumi's silence, Bartolomeo continued, Haha, I know you might feel bad about taking something for nothing. Don't worry, this sword is just a small gift. I'm Bartolomeo, and I'm officially inviting you to be my right-hand man. Takumi bluntly replied, No thanks. Without another word, he walked past Bartolomeo with a stoic expression. Huh? Bartolomeo was momentarily stunned. He quickly caught up, once again blocking Takumi's path. I'm the boss of 3 whole streets now. Stick with me, and I promise you'll be living the high life. No one would dare mess with you. Takumi didn't bother responding and once again walked past him. Bartolomeo, clearly frustrated, angrily unsheathed the Sandai Kitetsu and pointed it at Takumi. Hey! I'm being serious here. How could you just reject me like that? No sooner had he spoken than a shiver ran down his spine. He hadn't intended to actually attack Takumi, but his body moved on its own, forcing him to swing the cursed blade at him. Wah, what's happening? My body. It's out of control. Hey, watch out! Bartolomeo shouted as he swung the sword at Takumi. With a simple sidestep, Takumi avoided the strike. As Bartolomeo raised the sword to strike again, Takumi swiftly struck Bartolomeo's hand with a powerful knife-hand chop. The intense pain forced Bartolomeo to release his grip, and the Sandai Kitetsu clattered to the ground. At the same time, Bartolomeo's body returned to normal. He looked at his hands, then at the fallen sword, a shudder running through him. What the hell is this cursed sword? It made me attack him. Takumi coolly replied, Only those with weak wills are controlled by the sword. With that, he resumed walking. Bartolomeo stared after Takumi's retreating figure in awe. Scratching his head, he recalled how earlier that morning, Takumi had wielded the sword with ease, as if it were nothing. The more he thought about it, the more his admiration for Takumi grew. As expected from someone I admire. Bartolomeo clenched his fist in excitement. Amazing! Someone like him is exactly the kind of person who should be my partner. As Takumi left the alley and returned to the main street, the system's notification echoed in his mind. Ding! You have gained Bartolomeo's admiration. Sign in progress plus 10%. Current total progress. 30%. Reward. New skill. Fairy Sphere. Information about the Fairy Sphere skill quickly flooded into Takumi's mind. Takumi stopped in his tracks. The Fairy Sphere was a legendary super magic from Fairy Tail, capable of creating a wide area, invincible protective barrier that could even freeze time within it. It was an incredibly powerful defensive magic. Takumi never imagined that he'd gain such a formidable skill from Bartolomeo. This was definitely a win. It seemed that guy was useful after all. In a much better mood, Takumi prepared to resume his bounty hunting. While he was reviewing the wanted posters, a tall man with curly hair, wearing a green visor and dressed in a white vest over a dark blue shirt, rode past him on a bicycle, a cold aura surrounding him. Takumi instinctively looked up. Even though the man had already cycled away, the distinctive hairstyle and outfit were enough for Takumi to recognize him. It was Admiral Akiji. Rayleigh coming to Loguetown made sense. He was here to pay respects to Roger. But why would an admiral like Akiji show up in Loguetown at this time? Could he be here to meet with Smoker? From what Takumi recalled, Akiji and Smoker did seem to have a decent relationship. Before Takumi could dwell on it any longer, the roar of a motorcycle engine caught his attention. Smoker, riding his smoke-powered, amphibious trike, was rapidly approaching. Akiji and Smoker met up without issue. The two of them stopped in the middle of the street and exchanged a few words. Whatever they discussed, Takumi had no interest in. He was about to leave when Smoker suddenly spotted him. Starting up his trike, Smoker sped toward Takumi, pulling a dramatic drift to block his path. Takumi stared at him, exasperated. With a cigar in his mouth, Smoker stared Takumi down. Where do you think you're going, kid? Akiji, having followed Smoker on his bike, stopped beside them. After giving Takumi a once-over, he turned to Smoker. Smoker, what's with all the urgency? Did this kid do something? Chapter 37. Chapter 37. Loguetown, the lazy justice of an admiral. Smoker kept his eyes fixed on Takumi and explained, this kid isn't ordinary. Earlier today at the execution platform, he used armament Haki to catch a special bullet fired by a pirate. Armament Haki, huh? Akiji glanced at Takumi, noticing the wooden sword hanging by his side. Kid, are you a swordsman? Takumi replied calmly. You could say that. Akiji turned back to Smoker, who still looked tense. Waving his hand dismissively, Akiji said, he's just a wandering swordsman. He hasn't done anything wrong. Come on, stop looking so serious and let him go. Smoker frowned, clearly annoyed, but before he could argue, Akiji pointed towards the port. On my way here, I ran into some pirates who were blowing up the harbor. I told them I wasn't there to arrest them, but they insisted on fighting, so I froze them. Your men were heading to the port, but they might not realize that the people I froze are fragile. They could easily shatter and die if they aren't careful. But, hey, if you don't mind a few dead pirates, then don't worry about it. Akiji had the powers of the ice fruit. He could freeze anything he touched, turning parts of his body into ice. The pale blue ice he created could take any form, making weapons to attack his targets. Akiji was so strong that he didn't even need to touch something to freeze it. He could freeze entire areas, even parts of the ocean. He often used this power to cycle across the sea by freezing the water beneath his bike. Those he froze didn't die immediately. They entered a state of suspended animation. But their bodies became brittle, easily shattered by even minor impacts. If thawed quickly, they could survive. Smoker's brow furrowed further. With clear frustration, he growled, damn it. Fine. You keep an eye on the kid while I go handle this. And don't let him escape. I still have questions for him. Yeah, I got it. Go on, Akiji said lazily. Smoker shot Takumi a final glance before revving his bike and speeding off toward the harbor. Once Smoker was gone, Akiji yawned loudly. Man, I'm beat. Time for a nap. Looking at Takumi, he added, hey, kid. Smoker wants to talk to you. Think you could head to the marine base and wait for him? Takumi raised an eyebrow, confused. Akiji didn't wait for a reply. Not answering? I'll take that as a yes. Ah, so tired. See ya. With that, he hopped back on his bike and rode off. Takumi watched Akiji's retreating figure, amused. So this is what it means to follow lazy justice as an admiral, huh? Shaking his head with a chuckle, Takumi didn't linger. He needed to get back to catching bounty targets. Even though a few minutes had been wasted here, it wasn't enough to slow him down. As the deadline for his contest with Rayleigh approached, Takumi dragged 10 unconscious bounty targets to their meeting point, right as Rayleigh arrived with his own batch. Not bad, Rayleigh said with a smile, glancing at the 10 men Takumi had brought in. You caught more than I expected. Takumi glanced at Rayleigh's haul. He had 11 men, including one Takumi had originally targeted but Rayleigh had intercepted. Looks like you're one short. Guess that means I win, Rayleigh grinned. A bet's a bet, kid. No backing out now. Yeah, I got it, Takumi muttered. I lost, fair and square. Ha ha ha. I like your attitude, Rayleigh said, tossing one end of the rope binding his captives to Takumi. Takumi caught it effortlessly. Rayleigh continued, even though I'm retired, the Marines still have a bounty on my head. Technically, I'm still considered a pirate to them, so it wouldn't be wise for me to claim these bounties. You go ahead, whatever you get, we'll split it 50-50. Takumi couldn't help but roll his eyes. He didn't really want to go either. But if he wanted the bounty money, Smoker's signature was required. If he didn't go to the Marine base, he wouldn't get paid. No money meant no alcohol. And no alcohol would give him a headache. So, in the end, he had no choice but to head to the Marine base. Fine, Takumi sighed. Rayleigh laughed heartily. I'll be waiting at the tavern. Don't take too long. With that, Rayleigh turned and walked off, leaving Takumi to drag all 21 captives to the Marine base. As he passed through the town square, people began to notice him. Hey, look at that kid. How is he so strong, dragging all those people by himself? Who are they? Wait a minute. Isn't that guy from West Street? The one with a 30,000 belly bounty? And those other guys, they're from East Street. Oh my gosh, are all those people he's dragging bounty targets? Looks like it. Hold on. Why does that kid seem so familiar? Ah, I remember now. He's the one from this morning who caught that bullet with his bare hands. That's right. I remember too. Wow, who is this kid? He caught a bullet, jumped from such a height without a scratch, and now he's caught all these bounty targets? That's insane. Ignoring the murmurs around him, Takumi kept walking. When he finally reached the Marine base, the soldiers there were stunned to see a child dragging 21 unconscious bodies. Hey kid, who are these people? One of the Marines asked, bewildered. Bounty targets, Takumi answered, his face expressionless. What? Are you saying all these guys are bounty targets? The Marine was shocked. Takumi nodded. Yep. Unbelievable. Did you catch them all by yourself? No, Takumi replied. Right. Let's get these guys into Smoker's office, the Marine said, motioning to his comrades. Several Marines rushed forward, helping Takumi carry the captives into Smoker's office. The office wasn't large to begin with, and now it was nearly filled with the bodies of the unconscious bounty targets. Takumi didn't have to wait long. Soon, Smoker's voice echoed down the hallway. Did anyone come looking for me while I was out? Smoker asked. No, sir, a Marine replied. That Akiji. Never mind. Go thaw out those frozen pirates, Smoker ordered. Yes, sir, the Marine responded. A moment later, Smoker opened the door to his office. When he saw the mountain of bodies piled up inside, he froze in the doorway, his eye twitching. Would someone like to explain what the hell is going on here? Chapter 38. Chapter 38. Loguetown, Smoker's Challenge. Loguetown is the closest town to the entrance of the Grand Line. Because of this, the town attracts a lot of bounty hunters looking to capture the many criminals who pass through on their way to the Grand Line. Since Smoker was stationed here, he's had to sign off on countless bounty claims, with hunters bringing in 2 or 3 criminals at a time. But this was something else entirely. Ah, Captain Smoker, you're back. A Marine rushed over to report. Sir, all these people are bounty targets. We've already verified them. What? They're all bounty targets? Smoker was taken aback. His eyes quickly landed on Takumi, who was leaning against the wall of his office, calmly sipping from a flask. It's that kid. Smoker frowned, weaving through the pile of unconscious bodies in the center of the room as he approached Takumi. Kid, you catch all these guys? Takumi set down his flask, meeting Smoker's gaze with a calm expression as he nodded. Even though only half of them were his captures, admitting that might raise some unwanted suspicion. Smoker squinted. Are you a bounty hunter? I'm a traveler, Takumi replied. Traveler? Smoker didn't buy it. A traveler, huh? What kind of traveler hauls in this many bounties? You that desperate for money? Takumi didn't deny it, simply giving a short, yeah. Though still suspicious of Takumi's true identity, Smoker was at least certain of one thing. This kid isn't a pirate. Hey, how much are all these bounties worth combined? Smoker called out to the Marine standing by the door. The Marine snapped to attention. Sir, the total comes to 4,550,000 belly. Get these people recorded. Sir, they're already logged, the Marine responded quickly. Smoker nodded, slightly annoyed. Bring me the paperwork. Yes, sir. The Marine handed Smoker the bounty forms, already filled out. Smoker signed his name on the documents before passing them to Takumi. Takumi took them without hesitation. Now that he had what he came for, it was time to leave. But just as he turned to go, Smoker stepped in front of him. I'm not done with you yet. What's your name? Takumi sighed. Takumi. How old are you? 10. 10? Smoker was momentarily thrown off, but continued, when did you start training with armament Haki? Takumi gave Smoker a flat look. Less than a month ago. What? Smoker was stunned, then burst out laughing. Haha, you expect me to believe that? No way you caught a bullet with just a month of Haki training. Takumi didn't bother to argue. Just then, a lazy voice drifted into the room. What's with all the bodies? Akiji appeared in the doorway, scratching his head. You actually came? What do you mean, actually came? Smoker asked, confused. Akiji waved it off. Nothing important. So why exactly are you in Loguetown? Smoker asked, clearly irritated. Can't a guy visit without a reason? I was passing by and thought I'd drop in, Akiji replied nonchalantly. Well, you're just in time, Smoker said, chewing on his cigar. Roger's death anniversary is coming up, and there'll be plenty of pirates showing up to pay tribute. If you've got nothing better to do, why don't you stay and help catch them? Akiji looked disgusted. I didn't come here to catch pirates. That's your job. Smoker glared. You're a Marine. Catching pirates is part of your duty. Akiji groaned, scratching his head in frustration. Such a pain. I'm just on a stroll, and you want me to chase after some small-time pirates? Do it yourself. Smoker clenched his teeth. You're a vice admiral. Is that really how you should be talking? You're still the same as ever, Akiji sighed, waving a hand dismissively. Fine, fine. Since you're asking, I'll help out this time. Help out? You're a Marine. Catching pirates is your job. Smoker shot back, veins pulsing in his forehead. All right, no need to get worked up. What about the kid? Akiji asked, nodding toward Takumi, who had been edging toward the door. Smoker narrowed his eyes, his lower body suddenly transforming into smoke. In an instant, he reappeared in front of the door, blocking Takumi's exit. Smoker had the power of the smoke fruit, a Logia-type devil fruit that allowed him to turn his body into smoke. He could also solidify the smoke to trap his enemies. While it wasn't the most impressive Logia ability in the world, in the pirate world, it was still a formidable power. Takumi, you're not leaving until I'm done asking questions, Smoker said sternly. Takumi sighed inwardly. You're not from Loguetown, are you? Smoker asked, his eyes sharp. Takumi didn't want to waste time with more questions, but not answering would only cause more trouble. He nodded. Where are you from? Smoker pressed. Windmill Village. Windmill Village? Sounds familiar. Smoker muttered, trying to recall. Akiji rubbed his chin, then chimed in. Isn't that Garp's hometown? Smoker's eyes widened. That's right. Windmill Village is Vice Admiral Garp's hometown. So, you know Garp? Takumi did indeed know Garp. In fact, he had just managed to shake the old man off back at Baratie. But telling the truth would only invite endless questions from Smoker. Without hesitation, Takumi shook his head. Heard of him, never met him. Never met him? You sure about that? Smoker asked, clearly skeptical. At that moment, Akiji suddenly sat down on the floor, crossing his legs. Smoker shot him a puzzled look. What are you doing? My legs were getting tired. Don't mind me, carry on, Akiji replied, waving a hand. Smoker felt his patience slipping. Alright, kid, one last question. You say you're a traveler, so where are you heading next? Grand Line, Takumi answered without hesitation. Smoker paused. You're going alone? Takumi nodded. Do you even know what the Grand Line is like? A kid like you, going there is suicide, Smoker warned. Akiji, still seated, propped his head up with one hand and remarked, Come on, Smoker, maybe this kid will make a name for himself on the Grand Line. What's a 10-year-old traveler going to accomplish? He's just a child, Smoker insisted, his gaze locking onto Takumi. If you're so set on going to the Grand Line, then fight me first. If you win, I won't stop you. But if you lose, you join the Marines. Chapter 39. Loguetown, the Navy captain who tried to push his luck. From the moment Smoker saw Takumi use armament Haki to catch a bullet with his bare hand, he made up his mind. If Takumi wasn't a pirate, then Smoker was going to recruit him into the Navy. It wasn't just Takumi's natural talent for Haki at such a young age that caught Smoker's eye. It was also his composure and keen observational skills. Bullets travel incredibly fast. Most people, even if they can block a bullet, would find it nearly impossible to catch one with such precision. A tiny miscalculation would result in a bloody and painful injury. But Takumi did it with ease. That's why Smoker was so interested in him. If he could get Takumi to join the Navy, it would be a huge win. Smoker's intentions were clear. Takumi, on the other hand, was quietly frustrated. It was obvious that Smoker had been planning this from the start, just waiting for him to fall into the trap. If Takumi had wanted to join the Navy, he would have accepted Garp's offer long ago. He wouldn't have waited until now. Takumi was about to refuse when Akiji's lazy voice cut in. The kid's not a pirate, right? He doesn't have a bounty on his head and hasn't committed any crimes. Picking a fight with him. That's not really your style, Smoker. Smoker shot Akiji an annoyed look. Whose side are you on? Akiji waved him off. I'm on the side of justice, of course. But there's no need to always resort to violence. It's a beautiful day. Why not find a sunny spot and take a nap? Smoker was speechless. Akiji's words made it seem like he was bullying Takumi. A bead of sweat rolled down Smoker's forehead. After all, he was still in his 20s, young enough to care about his reputation. Hey Takumi, Smoker said, clearing his throat. It's just a friendly spar. You wouldn't turn that down, would you? I refuse, Takumi replied flatly. Smoker nearly choked on his cigar, coughing several times. Cough, cough. Fine, no sparring. Then just join the Navy. No. Kid, don't push your luck. Akiji interjected again. Seems like the one pushing their luck here is you, Smoker. Smoker was fuming. Akiji, did you come to Loguetown just to make things difficult for me? Not at all, Akiji said innocently, scratching his head. I'm just calling it like I see it. If the kid doesn't want to join the Navy, then let it go. Why force it? Takumi's talent would be wasted if he doesn't join the Navy, Smoker argued, his brows furrowed. Sure, he says he's just a traveler now, but what if he becomes a pirate later on? Akiji looked at Takumi. Kid, are you planning to become a pirate? Not interested, Takumi answered, unamused. See? Akiji turned back to Smoker. He says he's not interested in being a pirate. You can let him go now, right? Smoker was at a loss for words. Outside the office, a few Marines stood awkwardly, not sure what to do. Smoker was stuck. He couldn't move forward or back. If he stubbornly insisted on fighting Takumi, regardless of the outcome, his reputation would take a hit. What irked him most was Akiji's complete lack of support. If Takumi were a pirate or had a bounty on his head, Smoker would have a reason to fight him. But the kid wasn't a pirate, and there was no bounty. That made things tricky. Weighing his options, Smoker clenched his teeth around his cigar and said grudgingly, Fine, you can go. But if I ever catch you doing something wrong, I'll hunt you down, no matter where you are. Takumi just gave him a look. Seriously? With your skills? Better not waste your energy. With a calm, oh, Takumi stepped past Smoker. Smoker reluctantly moved aside to let him through. Takumi left the office, and with a Marine guiding him, he collected his bounty. Leaving the Navy base, Takumi followed his memory and headed back to Roger's tavern. Inside, Rayleigh was chatting with the tavern owner. When he saw Takumi return, he smiled. So, how much did you get? Takumi handed over the money, keeping 2 million belly for himself and giving Rayleigh the remaining 2,550,000. After all, Rayleigh had captured one more bounty than he had. Rayleigh took 1 million for himself and handed the remaining 1,550,000 to the tavern owner. Huh? This is way too much, Mr. Rayleigh. I can't accept this, the tavern owner said, trying to return the money. Rayleigh grinned. I'm staying in Loguetown for the next few days and I'll be staying here. Consider it payment for the drinks and the room. But it's too much, the tavern owner protested. I really can't accept this, Mr. Rayleigh. If you don't take it, I'll take Takumi and go find another place to drink, Rayleigh said, getting to his feet as if ready to leave. Seeing no other option, the tavern owner relented. All right, I'll take the money. He turned to Takumi. Kid, you're not from Loguetown, right? If you don't have anywhere to stay, you can stay here with Mr. Rayleigh. You can drink as much as you want until you leave. Takumi nodded. Sure. After all, it didn't matter to him where he stayed. Takumi, Rayleigh said suddenly, you still owe me a drink. Takumi sighed. I know. Rayleigh chuckled. Well, since the owner here is covering all our drinks until we leave, you'll just have to buy me that drink next time. Takumi just stared at him. Ha ha ha, Rayleigh laughed, cracking open a bottle and sliding it over to Takumi. Takumi took the bottle, but just as he took a sip, the sound of footsteps came from the tavern door. A group of thugs kicked open the small wooden door, barging in noisily. Bring out all the booze. The leader of the group was a fat man with 2 large axes strapped to his waist, looking every bit the tough guy. Sorry, the tavern owner said with a blank expression. This place has been reserved. You'll have to find another tavern to drink in. Hey, do you know who our boss is? Talking to him like that, are you asking for trouble? One of the lackeys shouted. Yeah, you better bring out the booze, or we'll smash this place up. Another thug added. Behind them, a thin man wearing a red snake-patterned coat and a blue and white striped headscarf appeared at the entrance. Move aside, the headscarfed man said coldly. The 2 thugs in front turned to sneer at him. Who the hell are you? Never seen him before. You think you can order us around? Get lost if you know what's good for you. They laughed. Without a word, the headscarfed man pulled out a double-barreled pistol and, without hesitation, shot both men in the head. Chapter 40. Chapter 40. Loguetown, Rayleigh's recognition. Bastard. You're asking for it. Guys, get him. Take down that gunman. The companions of the 2 men who were shot in the head immediately roared in anger and charged at the man in the headscarf by the door. You're the ones asking for it. The man in the headscarf narrowed his eyes slightly, put away his double-barreled pistol, and pulled out 2 tonfa with rounded ends. In one swift motion, he dashed through the group of thugs. When he stopped in front of their leader, the obese man, the entire tavern fell silent. Behind him, every single one of the thugs collapsed to the floor, lifeless. The previously smug, obese leader turned pale as a sheet. You bastard. You killed my men. I'll make you pay for that. Shouting, he drew his twin axes and swung them at the man in the headscarf with all his might. Pathetic. The headscarfed man scoffed, effortlessly shattering one of the axes with a single strike from his tonfa. Another quick strike landed squarely on the obese man's face, sending him flying across the room and crashing into the opposite wall. You bastard. What did you do to my tavern? The tavern owner's face twisted in anger. Takumi and Rayleigh remained silent, both staring at the man in the headscarf. Rayleigh didn't recognize him, but Takumi did. It was Jin, the demon man, and the commander of the Krieg pirates. Krieg was the pirate captain Takumi had taken down at Baratie. Kid, I've been looking for you. Jin snarled, his eyes filled with fury as he glared at Takumi. When Krieg had gone to Baratie, Jin hadn't accompanied him because he had another mission. When he found out that Krieg had been killed, he nearly lost it. Jin was the most loyal member of the Krieg pirates. Driven by the need for revenge, Jin had been searching for Takumi ever since. That's why he was here now. Takumi stared at him with a hint of annoyance. Jin was known for being ruthless and merciless, but also for repaying his debts. If this were the original storyline, Jin would have been indebted to Sanji, and even knocked out Krieg to repay that debt. But now that Krieg was dead by Takumi's hand, and Takumi had no debt to Jin, it was only natural for Jin to come after him. It seems there's quite a deep grudge between you two, Rayleigh said, still wearing his amused spectator smile as he took another drink. The tavern owner, on the other hand, was furious. Whatever grudge you have, don't settle it in my tavern. Look at this, you've broken several of my tables. Jin's face twisted in anger, and he turned his menacing gaze toward the tavern owner. He pulled out his double-barreled pistol and fired a shot straight at him. The tavern owner flinched in terror. Rayleigh, still holding a bottle of booze in one hand, drew his sword with the other. As the bullet flew towards them, Rayleigh deftly redirected its path with the flat of his blade. The bullet whizzed past the tavern owner's hair, smashing into the liquor shelf behind him, shattering a bottle. Jin frowned slightly. Rayleigh, on the other hand, sighed in disappointment. What a waste of good booze. Humph! Jin snorted, turning his focus back to Takumi. Without another word, he fired several more shots at Takumi, then charged forward with his tonfa. Takumi calmly tilted his head, dodging each bullet with ease. As Jin closed in, Takumi drew his sword, Toya Lake. Time to test out the divine departure technique. With a flash of his eyes, Takumi swung his blade, infusing his strikes with swirling Haki. The Haki-infused sword energy seemed almost sentient, twisting and turning to dodge Jin's tonfa before striking him directly in the back. Jin spat out a mouthful of blood, collapsing face first onto the floor, unconscious. That was incredible. The tavern owner was stunned. Rayleigh, who had been watching with a relaxed expression, suddenly tensed up when Takumi used that technique. Wait a minute. Rayleigh muttered in surprise. Was that divine departure? Takumi quietly sheathed Toya Lake and took a drink from his bottle. Rayleigh's eyes widened as he looked at Takumi. He was certain Takumi had just used divine departure. That was one of Roger's sword techniques. Even if someone understood the principles behind it, most couldn't replicate it. Even with natural talent, it required years of rigorous training to master. But Takumi, this kid, had done it effortlessly. Rayleigh had been skeptical when Shanks said Takumi had the potential to shake the world in the future. Now, he believed it. A boy who could easily master one of Roger's sword techniques. There was no way he was ordinary. Aren't you going to hide? Takumi asked flatly, taking another sip of his drink. Rayleigh snapped out of his thoughts, finally noticing the sounds of Marines approaching from the alley outside, drawn by the commotion. This kid's observation Haki is excellent, Rayleigh thought, glancing at Takumi with newfound admiration. Rayleigh chuckled, got to his feet, and looked at the tavern owner. Mind if I hide out in your storeroom for a bit? The tavern owner, confused but compliant, nodded. Rayleigh strolled into the storeroom where the tavern kept its liquor. Moments later, Smoker burst in with a group of Marines. Seeing the corpses scattered across the floor, Smoker's brows furrowed. His eyes then landed on Takumi, who was casually drinking at the bar as if nothing had happened. That kid again. Did he kill all these men? Smoker turned to his men. Take these bodies outside. Yes, sir. The Marines sprang into action, dragging the bodies away. Smoker sat down next to Takumi. His gaze fell on the empty bottle next to him. Did you drink that bottle too? Smoker asked, narrowing his eyes. Takumi glanced at Rayleigh's empty bottle and continued drinking, ignoring Smoker's question. Seeing that Takumi wasn't going to answer him, Smoker turned to the tavern owner and said, "Give me a glass of rum." The tavern owner coldly replied, "There's no booze here for you." Smoker didn't seem to care about the tavern owner's frosty attitude. Using his smoke, he grabbed a bottle from the shelf, popped it open, and took a swig. "Kid, did you kill those men?" Smoker asked, his face impassive. "No," Takumi replied calmly. Just then, one of the Marines called out, "Captain Smoker, there's one still alive." Smoker turned to see the Marine hauling up a man. When Smoker saw the man's face, he raised an eyebrow. "This is Jin, the demon man? The commander of the Krieg pirates? I remember Krieg died a few days ago, and Jin's been hunting down the guy who killed him. But why is he here? Does that mean you're the one who killed Krieg?" Smoker turned his surprised gaze back to Takumi. But Takumi just kept drinking, as if the whole thing had nothing to do with him. Chapter 41. Chapter 41. Loguetown, a little gambling never hurt anyone. Ding. You've earned Silver's Rayleigh's recognition. Check in progress plus 20%. Current progress at 50%. Observation Haki level increased by 1. Current level, LV4. The sudden system notification nearly made Takumi choke on his drink. As his observation Haki leveled up, he suddenly became aware of the heartbeats of nearly half the people in Loguetown. The overwhelming noise made his head pound. Thankfully, it only lasted a few seconds before fading away. Takumi rubbed his temples in annoyance. Rayleigh sure was something. Even while hiding out in the back room, the old man could still contribute to his check-in progress. Smoker, who had been watching Takumi closely, noticed the change in his expression and asked, "You okay?" Takumi responded flatly, "I'm fine." "Really?" Smoker didn't sound convinced. When Takumi didn't answer, Smoker continued, "You haven't had too much to drink, have you?" Takumi shot him a sidelong glance. Too much to drink? Not a chance. Even though he looked like a kid, Takumi's alcohol tolerance was almost superhuman. He could drink anyone under the table. Back before he ended up in this world of pirates, Takumi had been the kind of guy who never turned down a drink. For him, drinking was just like having a glass of water. But as much as he loved to drink, Takumi always knew when to stop. The moment he felt the slightest buzz, he'd put down his glass. "You're not much of a talker, are you?" Smoker chuckled, taking another swig. By now, the Marines had finished clearing out the bodies from the tavern. "Captain Smoker, what should we do with the bodies?" one of the Marines asked respectfully. "Just take them to the morgue," Smoker replied casually. "And the one who's still alive?" the Marine inquired. "Lock him up," Smoker ordered. "Yes, sir." The Marine saluted and quickly left the tavern. Now the only ones left in the tavern were the tavern owner, Takumi, Smoker, and Rayleigh, who was still in the back room. "There's going to be a lot of pirates coming to Loguetown soon," Smoker said, taking another drink. "Besides Roger's execution platform, this tavern named after him is bound to attract a lot of them. I'll be dropping by more often, owner." "Damn it, are you just trying to wreck my place?" the tavern owner grumbled. "If you're so eager to catch pirates, why don't you stake out the port? Every pirate has to come through there to get to shore. Stop turning my tavern into your personal hunting ground." "Some pirates are a lot trickier than you think. The ones who get caught at the port are just small-time thugs," Smoker said, puffing on his cigar. "I've got a bad feeling something big is going to happen. Roger's death anniversary in a few days might bring some trouble." "Humph. Even if something does happen, what's it to me?" the tavern owner huffed. "I'm just a small-time tavern owner. Besides, this place is fully booked for the next few days. I'm not taking in any other customers. If you want to catch pirates, go do it somewhere else and stay out of my way." "Fully booked?" Smoker raised an eyebrow. "Who booked it? Takumi?" the tavern owner answered without hesitation. "Yeah, him." There was no way he was going to spill the beans on Rayleigh. Smoker paused, then nodded. "Makes sense. The kid did just come into a big pile of bounty money, enough to book the whole place." Finishing the last of his drink, Smoker set down a stack of belly and stood up. Before leaving, he gave Takumi another look. "So, kid, you sticking around until after Roger's anniversary?" Takumi replied with a shrug. "Maybe. Depends on my mood." "Heh, fair enough," Smoker said, smirking as he walked out of the tavern. Not long after Smoker left, Rayleigh came out of the back room. "Haha. Looks like that young Marine's got his eye on this place," Rayleigh laughed. The tavern owner sighed. "Rayleigh, you might find this funny, but I'm at my wit's end. Ever since Smoker got stationed here, he's been a real pain. He's always coming here to catch pirates, and my tavern's been trashed more times than I can count." "There's good and bad in everything," Rayleigh said, grabbing another bottle and taking a swig. "Sure, he causes you trouble, but he also keeps a lot of trouble away. There are a lot of pirates out there who don't play nice." "True," the tavern owner admitted with a sigh. "If only all pirates were like Roger. Haha. No point in wishing for the impossible." "Come on, let's drink," Rayleigh laughed, inviting the tavern owner to join him. The tavern owner chuckled, shaking his head as he headed to the door. "You two go ahead. I'm going to lock up so no more troublemakers come in." As Rayleigh drank, he noticed that Takumi seemed to have had enough. "What's this? You're done already?" Takumi sighed. "I've already had plenty." "Haha," Rayleigh laughed. "You're still just a kid. Hey, want to hear some stories about Roger? I've got plenty of tales no one else knows." "Not interested." "Don't be so cold," Rayleigh grinned. "It's been a while since I've had this much fun drinking. I'm thinking of heading out to find some entertainment. Want to join me?" "No thanks," Takumi declined flatly. Rayleigh's idea of entertainment was easy to guess. Most likely gambling. Ever since the Roger pirates disbanded and Rayleigh settled in the Sabaody Archipelago, he'd become quite the gambler. When he wasn't coding ships, his daily routine involved either drinking or gambling. Despite his excellent observation Haki, he still managed to lose more often than not, sometimes even ending up broke. He'd even resorted to selling himself to human traffickers to make some quick cash. Takumi had zero interest in gambling. He'd much rather find a sunny spot to take a nap. Seeing that Takumi wasn't interested, Rayleigh sighed. "All right, I'll go by myself then. I'm feeling lucky today. Might win big, haha." Rayleigh grabbed a bottle of booze and headed for the door. Just as he reached the exit, the tavern owner returned. "Rayleigh, where are you off to?" the tavern owner asked. Rayleigh chuckled. I remember there's an underground casino nearby. It hasn't closed down yet, has it? The tavern owner was caught off guard. No, but it's been struggling. Fewer gamblers these days, so the place isn't doing well. Haha, as long as it's still open, I'm going to check it out. Rayleigh, I thought you didn't gamble. When did you get into it? A little gambling never hurt anyone. I'm just having some fun. Don't wait up for me for dinner, Rayleigh laughed as he left the tavern. The tavern owner scratched his head awkwardly. Takumi couldn't help but chuckle. Losing everything and calling it a little gambling? Really? Chapter 42. Chapter 42. Loguetown, the reluctant admiral forced to act. Not long after Rayleigh left the tavern, Takumi decided to head out as well. It was still early, so he wandered along the coast until he found a quiet little beach. He set up a lounge chair from his inventory behind a large rock and settled in for a nap. He had just dozed off when the sound of approaching footsteps reached his ears. Well. Looks like you snagged the best spot before I could, a lazy voice drawled. Takumi frowned slightly. He recognized that voice. It was Akiji. Not bothering to open his eyes, Takumi simply rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. Akiji smirked, but didn't push the issue. He just stood nearby, put on his sleep mask, and dozed off while standing. Time passed, and the two of them slept peacefully behind the rock. Meanwhile, a pirate ship was quietly making its way toward the seemingly deserted beach. The ship anchored at the shore, and dozens of men, dressed in nondescript clothing, disembarked and started heading towards the town. As they passed by the rock, they froze, spotting the two figures. What's going on here? A young man in a tricorn hat whispered nervously. Boss, I think these two might have seen us. Shouldn't we take them out? The captain, a gruff man with a scruffy beard and a face only a mother could love, smacked him on the head. Idiot. They're asleep. Just keep quiet and don't wake them up. But boss, what if they're faking it? Let me go check them out, the young man insisted. Yeah boss, let him take a look. If they're pretending to be asleep, they'll tip off the Navy as soon as we're out of sight. We might as well deal with them now, another pirate added. Fine, go ahead, but be quick about it, the captain sighed, rubbing his temples. The young man, his hand on his sword, cautiously approached Takumi and Akiji. All right, boss, I'm going in, he muttered back, trying to sound brave. The captain just shook his head, exasperated, while the other pirates looked on with excitement. Go for it, show them who's boss, one pirate urged. Don't chicken out now. Give them what they deserve, another laughed. Ha, this should be good. Those two won't know what hit them, a third added. Wait a minute, doesn't that guy sleeping on his feet look familiar? An older pirate suddenly remarked. Come on, you're seeing things. Everyone looks familiar to you, his companion scoffed. Takumi, on the other hand, had noticed the pirates long before they made landfall. But since they weren't making a fuss and seemed intent on sneaking past, he figured they weren't worth the trouble and decided to let it slide. But now, as they started chattering and getting louder, his patience was wearing thin. The young pirate, now standing over Takumi and Akiji, hesitated for a moment before slowly raising his sword toward Takumi. Just as the blade was inches from Takumi's face, Takumi's eyes snapped open, startling the young man so badly that he dropped his sword with a clatter. Why are you still here? Akiji said lazily, pushing his sleep mask up to his forehead and glaring at the pirate. The young man collapsed in terror. They were faking it. Boss, what do we do? Should we kill them? He looked back at his captain with pleading eyes. The captain, now pale, barked. Get back here now. The young pirate scrambled back to the group, practically tripping over himself in his haste. The captain, sweating nervously, called out. Listen, you two. You'd better not try anything. I've got 30 men with me, and you're just 2. If you promise not to tell the Navy we're here, we'll let you live. The Navy, huh? Takumi smirked and pointed at Akiji. He's with them. What? The pirates gasped. Akiji scratched his head, his voice as lazy as ever. Yeah, I did tell Smoker I'd help him catch some pirates, but I'm supposed to do that on Roger's death anniversary. You guys can go. I'm not in the mood to chase after you right now. Wait, he's actually Navy? One of the pirates stammered. This is bad, really bad. Of all the luck, we run into a Marine right after landing. Another panicked. Wait. I remember now. I saw his picture in the paper. That's Akiji, an admiral in the Navy. The older pirate shouted, his eyes wide with fear. What? An admiral? Are you sure? One of his crewmates asked, trembling. Positive. He's the real deal, the old pirate insisted. Oh no, we're dead. An admiral could crush us with one finger. What do we do, boss? The pirates wailed, their faces pale with dread. As the pirates descended into chaos, Akiji sighed, a drop of sweat forming on his forehead. I just said I'm not going to catch you. Could you at least listen? But his words fell on deaf ears as the pirates, including their captain, spiraled into despair. Screw it. We're dead either way, so we might as well fight. Maybe, just maybe, we'll get lucky. Let's go, men, the captain roared. Yeah. Better to die fighting than to just stand here and wait. Attack! Another pirate shouted. Charge! The pirates screamed, rushing toward Akiji. Internally, Akiji groaned. This was the last thing he wanted to deal with. He glanced over at Takumi, who had calmly stood up, adjusted his clothes, and was watching the scene like a disinterested bystander. With a sigh, Akiji muttered, I told you, I'm not here to fight. You idiots should have just walked away. Now look what you've done. As the pirates closed in, Akiji effortlessly dodged their clumsy attacks. Realizing he had no choice, he unleashed his ice time technique. A blast of freezing air swept over the pirates, and in moments, they were all frozen solid, locked in ice mid-charge. Damn, they just don't listen, Akiji muttered, scratching his head as he surveyed the frozen pirates. Takumi chuckled quietly but said nothing. He packed up his lounge chair and began heading back. As he walked away, Akiji watched him thoughtfully, rubbing his chin. That kid. He's got nerves of steel. Before Akiji could dwell on it, his den mushi suddenly rang. Answering it, he heard Garp's familiar voice. Ize, Taze. You're in Loguetown, right? Have you run into a kid named Takumi? Takumi? Akiji replied, scratching his head. Yeah, he was just here. Chapter 43. Chapter 43. Loguetown, when Akiji met Rayleigh. Hey, did you hear? Some old guy just bailed out that failing underground casino on West Street. What? Are you kidding me? That place was on its last legs. No way anyone could save it. I'm serious. The old man's got deep pockets. He bet big every time, but only won his first round. After that, he kept losing over and over, like the casino was rigged. Yeah, I heard that too. The old guy's something else. Kept losing and just wouldn't stop. He's down over 1 million berries now. Talk about stubborn. 1 million berries would keep a family of 3 comfortable for years. As Takumi made his way back to the tavern, he overheard bits of conversation on the street. He didn't need to ask. He knew they were talking about Rayleigh. Whether or not Rayleigh single-handedly revived a dying casino, Takumi couldn't say. But losing a fortune? That was classic Rayleigh. At least Rayleigh had the sense to give most of his money to the tavern keeper before heading out. Otherwise, he'd probably be flat broke by now. As Takumi continued on his way, he turned a corner into a narrow alley and wouldn't you know it, there was Rayleigh, strolling along with a big grin on his face. Hey, Takumi! Rayleigh called out with a friendly wave. Takumi nodded back, his face impassive. Rayleigh chuckled. Well, today wasn't my lucky day. I ended up placing a bet while watching someone else, even though I was out of money. And wouldn't you know it? The result was exactly what I predicted. If only I had some cash, I'd have made it all back. What a shame. So, how about it? Got any spare berries to lend an old man? Takumi sighed inwardly. Seriously? You've fallen so far that you're asking to borrow money? You're the Dark King Rayleigh, for crying out loud. No, Takumi said flatly. Really? Not even a little? Rayleigh asked, sounding disappointed. Come on, I'll pay you back with interest. How does 10% sound? No deal, Takumi said with a slight smirk. But I'll tell you what, I'll lend you the money if you forget about that drink you said I owe you. Rayleigh stared at Takumi for a moment, then burst out laughing. Ha! I can't believe you'd go that far to get out of buying me a drink. Fine, I'll pass on the loan. Takumi just shook his head. So, in the end, drinking is more important to you than gambling or money, huh? He couldn't understand why Rayleigh was so insistent about that drink. Honestly, if it were up to Takumi, he'd choose a bottle of good booze over 100,000 berries any day. Alright, enough about that. Let's head back to the tavern and keep the drinks flowing. Rayleigh clapped Takumi on the back, intending to steer him forward. But just as his hand was about to make contact, Takumi took a quick step forward, leaving Rayleigh's hand hanging in the air. It might have seemed like a coincidence, but Rayleigh knew better. Takumi had done that on purpose. Rayleigh withdrew his hand, a thoughtful look on his face. You really don't like people touching you, huh? I don't like people bothering me either. Can you keep it down? Takumi muttered. Rayleigh laughed again, louder this time. You're a real piece of work, kid. Takumi didn't bother replying, just picked up his pace and headed straight for the tavern. Rayleigh followed him, still chuckling. When they arrived at the tavern, they found Bartolomeo sitting on the stone steps outside. The moment Bartolomeo saw Takumi, he sprang to his feet, grinning widely. Hey! I asked the tavern keeper. You're Takumi, right? I'm Bartolomeo. Wanna be friends? Takumi didn't even blink. Making friends, are we? Rayleigh said with a knowing smile. Bartolomeo's excitement was palpable. Takumi, you're amazing. You're even younger than me. And yet, man, I really want to be friends with you. Please, what do you say? No, Takumi replied without hesitation, walking past him and into the tavern. Bartolomeo froze, his face contorting with disappointment. Oh no, he hates me. As Rayleigh walked by, he patted Bartolomeo on the shoulder. A real friend can handle a little rejection. If you can't take that, you should give up now. Takumi's not someone you can win over easily. With that, Rayleigh followed Takumi into the tavern. Bartolomeo watched them go, the gears turning in his head. The dejection he felt moments ago was quickly replaced with renewed determination. Clenching his fist, Bartolomeo muttered, Yeah, if I can't even handle this, then I don't deserve to be Takumi's friend. Just wait, Takumi. I'll prove myself to you. Takumi, having overheard Rayleigh's words to Bartolomeo, rolled his eyes as he entered the tavern. The tavern keeper, noticing their return, quickly brought over some drinks. Takumi took a swig, then sighed. Why'd you have to fill his head with all that nonsense? Rayleigh chuckled. Better to make a friend than an enemy, right? That green-haired kid looks like a punk, but he's got a good heart. Maybe he can't do much for you now, but who knows? Someday he might be a real asset. Takumi snorted. Yeah, right. I don't need it. He knew better than anyone what Bartolomeo's future held. Bartolomeo was better off idolizing Luffy than hanging around him. Just drop it, Takumi said flatly, taking another drink. Rayleigh just smiled, saying nothing more. The tavern keeper chuckled as he wiped down a glass. You're something else, Takumi, talking to Rayleigh like that. Even if you're not the first to do it, you've definitely gotta be the youngest. No harm done, Rayleigh said with a wave of his hand. The kid's not wrong. I was meddling. It's all good. As Rayleigh laughed and took another drink, the door to the tavern suddenly creaked open, letting in a cold draft. The tavern keeper barely had time to react before the lock on the door shattered with a loud crack. A tall figure stepped inside, descending the stone steps toward the tavern floor. The tavern keeper's breath caught in his throat. Akiji ducked slightly to peer into the dimly lit tavern. When he saw who was sitting with Takumi, his eyes widened in surprise. Well, if it isn't the Dark King Rayleigh. What brings you to Loguetown? Here for Roger's anniversary? Akiji pushed the door open and strolled inside. The tavern keeper paled, terrified. Rayleigh, however, didn't seem the least bit concerned. He took another sip of his drink and smirked. I've been retired for a while now, but you Marines just can't seem to let go. Retired or not, you're still a pirate as long as that bounty's on your head, Akiji said as he sat down on the other side of Takumi. He raised a hand to the tavern keeper. Hey, could I get a glass of sherry, please? Chapter 44. Chapter 44. Loguetown, seeing isn't always believing. Neither Takumi nor Rayleigh seemed at all surprised by Akiji's sudden arrival. The tavern keeper, however, wasn't nearly as composed. The moment he heard Akiji was a Marine, his face drained of color. So when Akiji asked for sherry, the poor man didn't even register it. His mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. He couldn't bear the thought of Rayleigh being taken away. Seeing the tavern keeper frozen in place, Akiji repeated himself. Hey, can you hear me? I asked for a glass of sherry, please. Ah! The tavern keeper snapped back to reality, his face twisting in irritation. I don't have any sherry for you. If you want a drink, try somewhere else in town. Oh, I see. No sherry, huh? Akiji scratched his head and shifted his gaze to the rum Takumi was drinking. In that case, I'll have what the kid's having. The tavern keeper clenched his fists, clearly angered. I already told you, I'm not serving you anything. This place was reserved by Mr. Rayleigh and the boy here from noon onward. Every drop of alcohol in this tavern belongs to them, and I'm not selling you a single drop. Got it? Now get out. There's no need to get upset. Akiji sighed. I just wanted a drink. If the place is reserved, then so be it. Get him a bottle, Rayleigh said casually, not the least bit concerned. The tavern keeper was incredulous. Mr. Rayleigh, he's a Marine. He's here to arrest you. Why would you offer him a drink? Rayleigh waved it off. No worries. Even if he wanted to arrest me, I doubt he could. Ha! This. The tavern keeper was caught between a rock and a hard place. Akiji chimed in. Relax, I'm not here to arrest Rayleigh. Though, I'll admit I'm a bit surprised to find him here. Actually, he was even more surprised to find Takumi hanging out with Rayleigh. Resigned, the tavern keeper shook his head and grabbed a bottle from the shelf, setting it down in front of Akiji. Akiji uncorked it, took a swig, and then looked over at Takumi. Well, I didn't expect you to be rubbing shoulders with the Dark King himself. Maybe Smoker's worries aren't so far-fetched after all. Smoker's concern was that Takumi, after turning down the Marines, might end up becoming a pirate. Takumi rolled his eyes. Don't worry, that's not happening. People are the most unpredictable creatures, Akiji said, taking another sip. You can't be sure of your future self's choices, no matter how certain you feel now. The future is full of unknowns. Takumi understood that logic, sure. But so what? His system, the traveler's system, already limited his choices, but even without it, his nature wouldn't allow him to join any side. Some things never change. Takumi smirked. I know what I'm doing. Whether it's the Marines or the pirates, I'm not interested. Not now, not ever. Believe it or don't, it's not my problem. Akiji chuckled and asked, You really won't consider joining the Marines? Not a chance. The moment Takumi finished speaking, he heard the familiar chime of the system in his mind. Ding. By refusing Marine Admiral Akiji's invitation, your sign-in progress has increased by 10%. Current total progress. 60%. Reward. Armament Haki level +1. Current armament Haki level. 5. Takumi could instantly feel his strength surge. The increase in armament Haki didn't cause any noticeable changes to those around him, so Akiji and Rayleigh had no idea he'd just gotten stronger. Interesting. Takumi couldn't help but chuckle. When he'd met with Shanks and Garp, it took several invitations before his progress ticked up. But here, with Akiji's seemingly casual question, the system registered it immediately. Just goes to show, appearances can be deceiving. Well, that's that then, Akiji said with a shrug. Unlike Garp, who would have pressed the issue endlessly, Akiji wasn't one to insist. If Takumi wasn't interested, that was the end of it. Taking another drink, Akiji added, just because I'm not arresting you now doesn't mean I won't later. I promised Smoker I'd help him on Roger's anniversary. So if you two start acting up, I won't hesitate to take you down. Rayleigh laughed heartily. Don't worry, I'm just here to pay my respects to Roger. Once that's done, I'll be on my way. I'm not looking to cause any trouble. Unless I don't have a choice, that is. Let's hope it stays that way. Akiji downed the last of his drink and got up to leave. You sure you don't want to stay for a few more? Rayleigh asked with a grin. Akiji waved him off. No thanks, I've got to call Garp back. Takumi sighed inwardly. Of course. This was Garp's doing. Even when he's not here, that crafty old fox finds a way to meddle. After leaving the tavern, Akiji pulled out his transponder snail and made the call. On the other end, Garp's voice crackled with urgency. So? Did the kid say yes? Akiji scratched the back of his head, chuckling. He turned me down. Damn, Garp muttered. Well, I figured as much. Let him be, then. Akiji added, by the way, when I was at the tavern, I ran into Rayleigh. What? Who'd you say? Doc King Rayleigh. What the hell's he doing in Loguetown? Garp paused, then continued. Wait a minute, what's he doing with Takumi? No idea. They seem to be drinking buddies. Akiji scratched his head. Rayleigh says he's retired, and Takumi's made it clear he's not joining either side. So, them having a drink together isn't that strange, really. Garp fell silent for a moment, then burst out laughing. Haha. You're right. As long as the kid doesn't become a pirate, I'm fine with it. Hey, Luffy, get back here. What? You want to be a pirate? You little brat, you and Ace are becoming Marines, no two ways about it. Akiji heard a series of punches and Luffy's yelps before the line went dead. Tucking the transponder snail back into his coat, Akiji yawned and lazily made his way toward the marine base in Loguetown. Back inside the tavern. Once Akiji had left, the tavern keeper finally exhaled in relief. Seems like that Marine, Akiji, isn't so bad. He's way better than Smoker. And he knows you, Mr. Rayleigh. He must be pretty high up in the ranks. A vice admiral, maybe? Rayleigh took a sip, his tone nonchalant. No, he's an admiral. The tavern keeper blinked, then gasped in shock. What? An admiral? Him? Rayleigh smiled. Yep. But that's not what should surprise you. The tavern keeper was puzzled. What could be more shocking than an admiral showing up in Loguetown? Rayleigh glanced at Takumi, who was quietly drinking, and smiled. Isn't it more surprising that the laziest admiral in the Navy came here personally to recruit Takumi? Chapter 45. Chapter 45. Loguetown. The day of remembrance arrives. Rayleigh. Does this guy ever know when to shut up? Takumi shot him an exasperated glance. The tavern keeper, on the other hand, was stunned. Wait a minute. How did I not realize this before? Takumi. Who are you, really? Why would a Marine admiral personally come to recruit you? Why, indeed. Takumi wondered the same thing. He had turned them down countless times, but they just kept coming, one after the other. Did none of them know how to take a hint? At least Akiji was lazy enough to give up after one rejection. If he had to deal with more guys like Garp, it would drive him up the wall. Takumi didn't bother answering the tavern keeper's question. Instead, he just kept sipping his drink in silence. Rayleigh laughed heartily. Haha, with a mindset like that, you'd be perfect for swordsmanship. You might just become the youngest sword master the world's ever seen. Not interested, Takumi replied dryly. Rayleigh continued, fame isn't something you can just dismiss. When your strength reaches a certain level, people will naturally start labeling you as the strongest. Whether you want it or not, it's out of your hands once everyone recognizes your power. It was true. Being the strongest isn't something you can just claim for yourself. When your strength surpasses everyone's expectations and outshines the so-called strongest, people will inevitably pin that title on you. It's not about whether you want it, it's about the label others decide to stick on you. And that's exactly what Takumi found so annoying. He didn't need those labels. He wasn't interested in dealing with people, let alone fighting them. He'd much rather remain a nobody, blending into the crowd, quietly completing his missions, exploring the world, and tasting its finest drinks. That would be more than enough. But, of course, life kept throwing troublesome people his way. Takumi downed the last of his drink and wiped his mouth. Whatever. Labels don't matter. As long as they don't get in my way, they can call me whatever they want. Now, that's what I call a carefree attitude, Rayleigh said with a smile. You really are different from everyone I've ever met. There are plenty of adults who can't even think like you do. Takumi, are you really just a kid? Takumi glanced at him, then smirked. I'm 10, thanks. Ha ha ha. Rayleigh burst out laughing. A 10-year-old, huh? You're something else. The tavern keeper looked between the two of them, completely lost. Rayleigh turned to him and said, Hey barkeep, bring us a few more bottles. Tonight, Takumi and I are drinking until we drop. Right away, the tavern keeper replied, quickly grabbing more bottles from the shelf and stacking them on the counter in front of them. That night, Takumi and Rayleigh drank until they were both nearly sick, but they still couldn't determine who could hold their liquor better. It was the first time Takumi had nearly drunk himself under the table since arriving in the world of One Piece. With the tavern keeper's help, Takumi eventually made it to the guest room the keeper had set aside for him. Just as he was about to fall asleep, the system's notification chimed in his mind. Ding! Drinking with Dark King Rayleigh has increased your sign-in progress by 10%. Current total progress. 70%. Takumi blinked, then chuckled to himself. Who would have thought that drinking with Rayleigh would trigger a progress mission? Even without a reward, it felt like a win. With that, he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Over the next few days, Takumi spent his time wandering around town or napping at his favorite spot. Akiji had taken a liking to the same spot, and the two often ended up sleeping there together. One on a lounge chair, the other standing up. As for Rayleigh, he'd occasionally capture a few bounty heads during the day, handing them over to the tavern keeper to collect the rewards from the marine base. Then, he'd take the money and head straight to the casino, where his relentless gambling had single-handedly brought the nearly bankrupt establishment back to life. At night, Takumi and Rayleigh would happily drink together at the tavern. Smoker, true to his word, would stop by Roger's tavern several times a day, occasionally catching a few pirates who had snuck into town. As for Bartolomeo, he shadowed Takumi nearly every day. To be fair, Bartolomeo's stalking skills were slightly better than Zoro's. Even so, no matter how well Bartolomeo hid or how far back he stayed, he couldn't escape Takumi's level 5 observation Haki. Finally, the day of Roger's execution anniversary arrived. Early that morning, Rayleigh asked the tavern keeper for 2 bottles of rum and then left with Takumi. Takumi hadn't planned on going, nor did he see any need to, but the possibility of triggering a mission prompted him to tag along. The sky was overcast, and a light rain was falling. Rayleigh held a black umbrella as the two of them walked side by side. Soon, they reached the edge of the central square, stopping at the entrance of a small alley. Because of the weather, the square was nearly empty. Even though there wasn't a marine in sight, Takumi and Rayleigh both knew there were plenty of them hiding in the surrounding buildings, ready to pounce on anyone who got too close to the execution platform. It looks like getting to the execution platform won't be easy, Rayleigh mused, gazing at the platform just 200 meters away. I wasn't here when Roger was executed. Do you want to know why? Takumi remained silent, uninterested. Rayleigh glanced at him and smiled. I figured you wouldn't care. Haha. If I'd been there, I probably wouldn't have been able to stop myself from trying to save that idiot, even if it meant he'd be mad at me. So, Takumi said, nodding toward the 2 bottles tucked under Rayleigh's arm, what are you planning to do with those? Before Rayleigh could answer, a loud explosion echoed from the direction of the main street. Screams filled the square. What few people had been there before were now fleeing in panic. Well, that's just bad luck, Rayleigh said with a wry smile. I was hoping to blend in with the crowd, but now if we go, we'll be sitting ducks for the Marines. Haha. Takumi gave him a flat look. Seriously? Are you actually worried about bullets in this world of all places? Takumi turned his attention to the source of the explosion, where thick smoke was billowing down the main street. As the smoke began to clear, it became evident that no one was there, except for a large crater in the street leading to the square. It was as if the bomb had gone off by itself, with no one around to set it off. Inside one of the buildings, Smoker, chewing on his cigar, watched the scene unfold through his binoculars. When the smoke cleared and no one appeared, his brow furrowed in confusion. Just then, a Marine reported, Sir, we've spotted 2 suspicious individuals at the southwest alley entrance. Smoker immediately turned his binoculars in that direction. Sure enough, there were 2 figures standing under a black umbrella at the alley's entrance. One tall, with a hood obscuring his face, and one short, whom Smoker could see quite clearly. Takumi? Smoker muttered, his frown deepening. What's he doing here? And who's that with him? Doesn't look like the tavern keeper. Chapter 46. Chapter 46. Loguetown, Rayleigh's tribute to a dear friend. Early that morning, Smoker had stationed hundreds of Marines in the buildings surrounding the central square, ready to ambush any pirates who might show up to pay tribute to Roger. Many people thought it was foolish for pirates with no blood ties to Roger, most of whom had never even met him, to risk coming to Loguetown on the anniversary of his death. But Roger's execution had sparked the great pirate era. Especially for pirates who set sail from the East Blue. Many looked up to and admired Roger. Before they attempted to enter the Grand Line, many would make a stop in Loguetown to see the place where the Pirate King had grown up. Smoker watched through his binoculars, trying to identify the person standing with Takumi. The weather wasn't helping, and with the other person holding an umbrella and wearing a hood, it was impossible to make out their face. At that moment, Akiji, who was lying on the floor behind him, spoke in a lazy tone. It's probably Rayleigh. Smoker paused, then turned to look at Akiji, frowning. What did you just say? Akiji sat up cross-legged, scratching his head with a blank expression. The person with him is likely Dark King Rayleigh. What? Smoker exclaimed, shocked. Dark King Rayleigh? Are you serious? Akiji nodded. Yeah, that's him. Smoker's face paled. This is bad. If we're up against Rayleigh, even with the 2 of us, there's no guarantee we can take him down. And with Takumi helping him. Damn it, that kid was lying to me the whole time. He said he wouldn't become a pirate, and now he's teamed up with Rayleigh. Whoa, hold on, Akiji said, waving his hand dismissively. Rayleigh told me he's retired, and Takumi said he's not joining the pirates. They're just drinking buddies. They're not going to cause any trouble. Smoker glared at him. And how do you know they're just drinking buddies? Have you met them before today? Sort of, Akiji replied, scratching his head again. I saw them at Roger's tavern. That's what they said, and I didn't see any signs of trouble. Didn't see any signs of trouble? That's your assessment? Smoker was fuming. Takumi could drink with anyone, but he chooses Rayleigh? You know Rayleigh's history. You're seriously going to take their word for it? You're a Marine Admiral. How can you be so gullible? Akiji sighed. Smoker, you're overthinking it. I don't think they're lying. But if they do start something, I won't stand by and watch. One of the Marines by the window, nervously observing the square, hesitantly asked. Sir, what should we do now? Should we go arrest those two? Arrest them? You think you can take down Dark King Rayleigh? Smoker snapped, causing the Marine to shrink back in fear. Smoker returned his attention to Takumi and Rayleigh, watching their every move through his binoculars. It looks like we're being watched, Rayleigh said casually. Yeah, Takumi replied without much interest. Rayleigh chuckled. What do you think? I'm starting to feel a little nervous. Takumi didn't respond. Ha! Rayleigh laughed. Guess it's best to get this over with quickly. I'm heading to the execution platform. Want to come? No, Takumi replied. All right then, wait for me here, Rayleigh said, handing the umbrella to Takumi. Taking the 2 bottles of rum with him, Rayleigh's glasses glinted slightly as he quickly made his way to the execution platform. In just a few seconds, he was there. Rayleigh didn't seem to care about the dirt. He sat right down on the platform, opened both bottles, and began pouring one out onto the platform while drinking from the other. He had so much to say, but when he tried to speak, not a word came out. All his feelings were poured into the rum. When his bottle was empty, and the one meant for Roger was fully poured out, Rayleigh set the bottles aside and bowed his head, a faint, trembling smile on his lips. The rain soaked his clothes, the wind tugging at his hood, revealing his shoulder-length, silver-white hair, now plastered to his face. From the alley, Takumi watched expressionlessly, holding the umbrella as Rayleigh stood in the rain, drenched from head to toe. Though the weather was gloomy and the distance between them was over 200 meters, even with Rayleigh's glasses, Takumi could tell that Rayleigh's heart was heavy with sorrow. He didn't know if Rayleigh was crying. The rain on his face would have hidden any tears. Smoker continued watching Rayleigh's every move through the binoculars. Seeing that Rayleigh had settled on the execution platform, Smoker narrowed his eyes. A Marine cautiously asked, Sir, shouldn't we do something about the man on the platform? Wait a little longer, Smoker said, biting down on his cigar. Akiji joined him at the window, looking over at the execution platform. It's a pain, and the chances are slim, but if you're determined to capture Rayleigh, I could give it a shot. Let's see how things play out, Smoker replied, still scanning the square. I'd love to capture Rayleigh, but I know our limits. Besides, I'm pretty sure that explosion on the main street had nothing to do with Rayleigh or Takumi. Let's wait until the real troublemakers show up. As if on cue, the ground where the explosion had left a large crater suddenly erupted with a group of fully armored, masked individuals. Each one held a bizarre weapon. Takumi couldn't recall ever seeing anyone dressed like this before. Attack! Someone shouted. The armored figures immediately unleashed their weapons, launching an assault on the surrounding buildings. Smoker's frown deepened, and he quickly issued orders. Arrest those troublemakers. Yes, sir. The Marines grabbed their weapons and prepared to engage the mysterious attackers. Seeing the chaos, Akiji and Smoker didn't waste a second. They jumped out of the window and landed in the square. But just as they hit the ground, the mysterious figures suddenly collapsed in unison. Smoker was stunned. What the hell just happened? Akiji was equally speechless, though he simply sighed. Chapter 47. Chapter 47. Loguetown, Rayleigh's farewell gift. When that group of mysterious attackers appeared, Takumi had no intention of getting involved. After all, with Smoker and Akiji around, there was no way they'd allow anyone to cause major destruction in Loguetown. But as soon as the attackers started their assault, a few of them decided to target him specifically. Various weapons were hurled his way. Takumi dodged repeatedly, but after a while, it got annoying. Finally, he coated his arm in armament Haki and sent a few of the attackers flying with a single punch. Seeing their comrades get taken down by a kid, the rest of the group shifted their focus to Takumi, swarming toward him. Already frustrated by the gloomy weather, Takumi shot them a glare. Instantly, anyone rushing at him collapsed under the pressure of his conqueror's Haki, dropping like flies. Rayleigh, watching from the execution platform, saw the battle unfolding and noticed Takumi being chased down by those thugs. Yet, he made no move to help. He didn't know the full extent of Takumi's abilities, but he could tell these goons were no match for him. The moment Takumi unleashed his conqueror's Haki, a glint of interest flashed in Rayleigh's eyes. Conqueror's Haki, huh? Rayleigh smirked. It seems you're even more impressive than I thought, Takumi. Roger. This kid, Takumi, might just be able to change the world in ways you did. If you were still alive, I bet you'd be eager to meet him. Just as Rayleigh finished speaking, he sensed Smoker and Akiji approaching from the nearby buildings. Without a word, Rayleigh hopped down from the platform, carrying the 2 empty bottles, and walked over to meet them. Smoker narrowed his eyes. Was this your doing? Rayleigh pointed over to Takumi, smiling. It was him. Akiji rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Conqueror's Haki, huh? What? Smoker was in disbelief. Are you saying Takumi took out all those guys with Conqueror's Haki? That's impossible. Not just anyone can have Conqueror's Haki. Even if Takumi does have it, he's just a kid. How could he possibly wield it so effectively? I'm surprised too, Rayleigh said with a grin. But he really did it. If Roger were alive, he'd definitely be intrigued by him. Well, I've done what I came here to do. It's time for me to go. Farewell, everyone. With that, Rayleigh laughed heartily and walked away. Smoker gripped his jit tightly, glaring at Rayleigh's retreating figure, his teeth clenched. Damn it. I'm still too weak. He knew all too well the gap in power between himself and Rayleigh. Even if Akiji took on Rayleigh one-on-one, the chances of victory were less than 50%. And if Smoker were to fight Akiji, his own chances of winning would be less than 1 in 3. So, even if they teamed up against Rayleigh, it would likely end in defeat. And then there was Takumi, an unpredictable factor. Smoker had no idea which side Takumi was on. If Takumi decided to help Rayleigh, their odds would drop even further. Oh, come on, Smoker, you're overthinking it, Akiji said, reading Smoker's thoughts even though he hadn't spoken them aloud. If Rayleigh wanted to cause trouble, he'd have done it already. Why wait until now? And as for that kid, Takumi, I've spent some time with him these past few days. We've taken naps together and chatted a bit. I can tell he genuinely has no intention of joining any side. There's no reason to worry about where his loyalties lie. Snapped out of his thoughts, Smoker's face twisted in shock. Wait, what? You slept with him? Akiji sighed. Why are you so surprised? We just took naps together, that's all. Smoker coughed awkwardly. By now, Smoker's subordinates had emerged from their hiding spots in the surrounding buildings. Hey, did someone already take care of these intruders? Lieutenant, what should we do with them? Lock them all up, Smoker ordered. When they wake up, we'll find out who they are. Yes, sir. The Marines quickly moved to round up the unconscious attackers. Akiji glanced in the direction Rayleigh and Takumi had gone, then asked, So we're just letting them leave? Smoker coughed again. Let them go. And I'll keep quiet about your situation. Huh? Akiji looked puzzled. What are you talking about? Nothing. Smoker muttered. I'm heading out, Rayleigh said with a smile as they walked toward the harbor. Takumi responded with a nonchalant, He was feeling a bit annoyed. He'd expected to trigger some sort of mission progress. But nothing happened. Noticing Takumi's lack of enthusiasm, Rayleigh continued, What about you? When are you leaving Loguetown? Soon, Takumi replied indifferently. Care to see me off? Rayleigh asked with a grin. Takumi was about to refuse. But Rayleigh pressed on. After all the drinks I've treated you to, seeing me off is the least you could do, right? Takumi sighed. All right. Rayleigh laughed heartily and kept walking. Before long, they reached the harbor. Even though the rain hadn't let up, there were still plenty of people in raincoats bustling about. Rayleigh looked out at the various ships docked there and smirked. Wanna guess which one's mine? I'll give you a prize if you get it right. Takumi shot him a skeptical look. A ship? Was Rayleigh really the type to sail alone on a boat? In Takumi's memory, Rayleigh was the kind of guy who swam from the Sabaody Archipelago, through the calm belt, all the way to Amazon Lily by himself. Someone like that wouldn't need a boat. When Takumi didn't respond, Rayleigh laughed again. What's the matter? Can't figure it out? Just take a wild guess. Takumi, not wanting to waste any more time, randomly pointed to a small wooden boat docked nearby. Rayleigh burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. I knew you'd get it right. That's my boat. Takumi blinked in surprise. Rayleigh continued, Since you guessed correctly, I'll grant you a favor. Whatever you need, good or bad, as long as it's within my power, I'll help you out. Takumi was internally groaning. How had he managed to pick the right boat? But even if it was true, he didn't need Rayleigh's offer. No thanks, Takumi replied. I don't need any favors from you. Don't be so quick to turn it down, Rayleigh said with a smile. You never know what the future holds. It's not like you're taking on a debt. This is a freebie. So why not take it? Ha ha ha. It's settled then. If you ever run into trouble, come find me on Sabaody. All right, I'm off. With that, Rayleigh leaped onto the small wooden boat, waved at Takumi from the deck, and began sailing off toward the Grand Line. Takumi watched Rayleigh's boat slowly disappear into the distance. He shook his head, ready to head back to the tavern, when a sudden shout caught his attention. "Hey! Someone took my boat. Damn it, who's the idiot who stole my little junker of a boat?" Figures. Takumi couldn't help but chuckle. Just then, the system's voice echoed in his mind. Ding. Sending off Dark King Rayleigh. Progress plus 10%. Current progress. 80%. Takumi blinked, surprised. Before he could fully process it, the system chimed in again. Ding. Earned the respect of Marine Lieutenant Smoker. Progress plus 10%. Current progress. 90%. Reward. Iron Body Skill upgraded to level 2. Chapter 48. Chapter 48. Loguetown, the so-called experiments. At the Loguetown Marine Base, Smoker had his men lock up the group of mysterious attackers who had attempted to wreak havoc in the town. After stripping them of their armor, they were shocked to discover that, despite varying in height and build, all of them had identical faces. "What the hell is this?" Smoker exclaimed in disbelief. "Why do they all look exactly the same?" Akiji, rubbing his chin in thought, mused. "Clones, perhaps. This reminds me of a certain organization from the North Blue." "The North Blue?" Smoker glanced at Akiji, surprised. "But we're in the East Blue. What would people from the North Blue be doing here?" Akiji shook his head. "I'm not sure. But these are just pawns, controlled by someone else. The mastermind is definitely still in Loguetown." "Damn it!" Smoker cursed, furrowing his brow. "They dare to cause trouble in Loguetown? I don't care if I have to tear the town apart, I'll find the one pulling the strings." Meanwhile, at the port, Takumi was in high spirits as he walked back. He hadn't expected that simply seeing off Rayleigh would trigger a progress task, nor that he would earn a favor from Rayleigh for free. It seemed today was his lucky day. Though it was still puzzling why he'd gained Smoker's favor. Who knows? Maybe he could complete the final 10% of progress today. As Takumi walked through the triangular gate at the port and entered the main street, he noticed a tall man with golden curly hair and a golden mask covering the upper half of his face, holding an umbrella. The man was accompanied by 4 children, each with differently colored hair, red, blue, green, and pink, heading toward the port. Isn't that the Vinsmoke family of Germa 66? What are they doing in Loguetown? Takumi stared at them curiously. Germa 66 is a powerful military force from the North Blue, a scientific combat unit led by the Vinsmoke family, representing the Germa 66 kingdom. The man leading the group of 4 children was none other than Vinsmoke Judge, the head of the Vinsmoke family. The 4 differently colored-haired children following him were all his children, born through genetic modifications. The girl with pink hair was Vinsmoke Reiju. The boy with red hair was Vinsmoke Ichiji. The boy with blue hair was Vinsmoke Niji. And the boy with green hair was Vinsmoke Yanji. These 4 children, in addition to being genetically modified humans, shared another identity. They were the siblings of Sanji. Yes, Sanji was also a child of the Vinsmoke family. However, due to a failed genetic modification, Sanji couldn't keep up with the rigorous training of his siblings and was often beaten by them. As a result, their father, Vinsmoke Judge, locked him away. Later, when Germa 66 came to the East Blue to subjugate a country, Sanji managed to escape with the help of his sister, Reiju. But when his father discovered him, he banished Sanji. That's how Sanji eventually met Zeph and, after nearly starving to death, helped open the Baratie, the sea restaurant. But Germa 66 should have come to the East Blue years ago. Their appearance in Loguetown now. Was it a coincidence, or was there a plan? Takumi didn't dwell on it for long. Judge and the 4 children walked past him. "Such failures," Yanji sneered. Ichiji added, "Haha, they actually got caught by the Marines. Well, this will test the loyalty of those experiments. These experiments have a detonator connected to their hearts. If they all explode, the Marine base will be destroyed. No, more like half the town will be blown away. Ha ha ha, these people are unlucky to have become the testing grounds for Germa's experiments," Niji said, laughing. Reiju smiled but said nothing as she walked alongside them. Judge chuckled. "Those experiments are programmed to self-detonate once captured. Even if a few Marines survive, without evidence linking it to us, they won't be able to touch Germa 66. Ha ha ha." The group continued to walk arrogantly ahead. Ichiji suddenly noticed Takumi looking their way and scoffed. "What are you staring at?" "Father, it seems this kid overheard our conversation. Should we take care of him?" Niji asked with a smirk. Judge glanced at Takumi dismissively. "What harm can a kid do? Let's go." Judge led Reiju and the others out of Loguetown without a second thought. Takumi, unfazed, continued on his way. Now he understood what was behind the group of identical-looking attackers that had appeared in the central plaza earlier. But even if Judge was right and those experiments self-destructed after waking up, with Akiji and Smoker around, the damage should be contained. Just as Takumi finished his thoughts, suddenly, a loud explosion came from the direction of the marine base. But there was only one explosion, and it quickly stopped. If what Judge said was true, and all the experiments had detonated, half of Loguetown should have been reduced to rubble. But from where Takumi stood, everything seemed intact. It was clear that Akiji and Smoker had managed to contain the remaining explosions. At the marine base, when the first clone woke up, it bit down on the detonator in its mouth, self-destructing. As the rest of the clones began to explode simultaneously, Akiji immediately activated his Ice Age ability, encasing the entire marine base in a protective layer of ice, containing the chain reaction of explosions. Damn it! Smoker cursed, looking at the marine base, now a wreck from the explosion. They self-destructed. Akiji released the surrounding ice, revealing the debris and remains, sighing. Now there's no evidence to trace these clones back to their origin. Damn it! Smoker looked around at the wounded marines and ordered, Akiji, we need to help the injured. Takumi, walking through town, could more or less guess what had happened at the marine base. Either way, it didn't concern him. Not thinking too much about it, Takumi turned down a familiar alley leading to the tavern. As he rounded a corner, Bartolomeo appeared. Takumi, there's trouble. Remember that cursed sword that controlled me to attack you? After you knocked it out of my hands the other day, I left it. But now someone else has picked it up, and they're going around attacking people with it, Bartolomeo said urgently. I tried to stop him, but I couldn't. Oh, Takumi responded indifferently, continuing to walk. Bartolomeo blinked in surprise, then quickly caught up, walking backward to face Takumi as he pleaded. A lot of people have been hurt. You're the only one who can stop him. Please come with me. This guy. Takumi glanced at him, exasperated. Bartolomeo was usually someone who enjoyed causing chaos. When did he become so concerned? Chapter 49. Loguetown, farewells shouldn't be drawn out. The Sandai Kitetsu was a sword that the spiky-haired Bartolomeo had snatched from a vendor and offered to Takumi in a misguided attempt to curry favor. From the beginning, Takumi had never expressed any desire to own this sword. It was all Bartolomeo's own doing, and the resulting chaos was his responsibility. No matter what happened, it wasn't Takumi's job to clean up the mess. So, regardless of what Bartolomeo said, Takumi had no intention of helping him. Seeing that Takumi was still ignoring him, Bartolomeo grew anxious. Please don't ignore me. Really, if you don't stop him, more people will get hurt. Someone might even die. And so what? Takumi said flatly. Go find the Marines. Don't bother me. Huh? Bartolomeo froze in confusion, watching Takumi walk past him. At that moment, a man with bloodshot eyes, clearly out of his mind, suddenly rushed out from a narrow alley in front of Takumi. Upon seeing Takumi and Bartolomeo, the crazed man let out a howl and swung his sword at Takumi, who was closest. It was the middle-aged man who had picked up the Sandai Kitetsu. Takumi dodged effortlessly, and the man's wild swing cut through the air. Undeterred, the man quickly adjusted his stance and swung the sword at Takumi again. This time, Takumi didn't bother dodging. He faced the attack head-on, grabbing the man's wrist with one hand and twisting it forcefully. However, unlike when Bartolomeo had been controlled, this time, the Sandai Kitetsu seemed almost fused to the man's hand. No matter how much force Takumi applied, the man wouldn't let go. Could it be that the longer someone is controlled by this cursed sword, the harder it becomes to release it? Frowning slightly, Takumi enveloped his other hand in armament Haki, grabbed the sword's blade, and with sheer brute strength, forcibly pried the sword from the man's grasp. As soon as the cursed sword was removed, the man's eyes rolled back, and he fainted on the spot. Takumi held the Sandai Kitetsu in his hand, examining it casually. Just as he was about to toss it aside, the familiar chime of the system echoed in his mind. Ding! Acquired the cursed sword Sandai Kitetsu. Progress plus 10%. Ding! Loguetown sign-in mission complete. Congratulations to the host for unlocking shave and paper art, and receiving the reward, Mastery in Fire Release, Dragon Flame Jutsu. Shave is a technique from the Rokushiki, which involves moving at high speeds by kicking the ground multiple times in an instant to generate explosive propulsion. Paper art is another Rokushiki technique, a defensive maneuver that allows the user to relax their body like paper, dodging attacks with fluid and precise movements. Now, all the Rokushiki techniques have been unlocked. Though shave might seem less useful due to the existence of flash step, Combining these two techniques could exponentially increase their effectiveness. Takumi glanced at the Sandai Kitetsu in his hand. He hadn't expected that the final bit of progress would come from this cursed sword. It seemed this sword would be with him for a while. Smiling, Takumi turned to the still-dazed Bartolomeo and asked, "Where's the Sandai Kitetsu's scabbard?" Bartolomeo snapped out of his daze and quickly replied, "It's nearby. I'll get it right away." With that, Bartolomeo hurried off to a nearby alley. Takumi opened his status panel. Name, Takumi. Age, 10. Sign and location, Drum Island, 0%. Physique, all attribute chakra. Haki, armament Haki LV5, Conqueror's Haki LV4, observation Haki LV4. Skills, fire release, dragon flame jutsu, mastery, swordsmanship LV6, flash step LV3, night guy LV2, divine departure, mastery, fairy sphere LV1, rokushiki, finger pistol LV1, iron body LV2, shave LV1, moonwalk LV1, tempest kick LV1, paper art LV1. Weapon, cursed sword star fragment, Toryu. System space, 100 by 100 by 100 cubic meters. Looking at the next sign and location listed, Drum Island, the first thing that came to Takumi's mind was the little reindeer Chopper, who had eaten the human fruit. Chopper would eventually become the doctor aboard Luffy's ship, a cute, fluffy little creature who got bashful when praised. Judging by the current timeline, Chopper should be around 5 years old, not yet having met Dr. Hiralik, who would teach him medicine. As Takumi mused over this, Bartolomeo returned with the scabbard for the Sandai Kitetsu. Takumi closed his status panel. Taking the scabbard from Bartolomeo, he sheathed the Sandai Kitetsu and then casually strapped it alongside Toryu at his waist. Bartolomeo stared, stunned, and asked, "Are you planning to use that cursed sword yourself?" Takumi nonchalantly replied, "Yeah," before turning to continue on his way to the tavern. Bartolomeo stood frozen in place, watching Takumi's back, growing more excited by the moment. "Ah, did I misunderstand you? To prevent others from being controlled by this cursed sword, you took it upon yourself to bear the burden. Takumi, you're such a warm-hearted person beneath that cold exterior. You really are the one I've chosen to follow." Back at the tavern. The tavern owner noticed that Rayleigh hadn't returned with Takumi and asked curiously, "Where's Mr. Rayleigh? Don't tell me he's gone gambling again?" Takumi replied coolly, "He's gone." "Huh?" The tavern owner paused, mid-polish of a glass. "He left without saying a word? I thought he'd at least wait until today was over before leaving." Takumi stared at him calmly and said, "I'm leaving too." "Ah?" The tavern owner was taken aback. Takumi continued, "I'll take all the wine in the cellar." "What?" The tavern owner exclaimed, "There are over 1,000 bottles in there. Can you carry them all?" Takumi nodded. After a moment of hesitation, the tavern owner nodded. "All right, if you want them, take them. Do you need any help?" Takumi shook his head. "When are you planning to leave?" asked the tavern owner. "Soon," Takumi replied. "All right then, let me treat you to a meal before you go," the tavern owner offered. Takumi nodded again. After setting down the glass he was polishing, the tavern owner stepped out from behind the bar. "Wait here in the tavern for a bit. I'll go buy some food to go with the wine." Takumi nodded once more. After the tavern owner left, Takumi went into the cellar behind the bar where the wine was stored and transferred it all into his system space. Then he emptied the wine racks in the bar and left the tavern. Takumi understood why Rayleigh had left without a word. Some farewells shouldn't be drawn out. That was Takumi's intention as well. So, after taking all the wine from the tavern, he purchased a small boat at the port and sailed directly to his next destination. The Baratie's supply ship had been destroyed in the earlier explosion at the port. Bartolomeo had been following Takumi the entire time. Seeing Takumi set sail, he rushed to the port, shouting after him, "Takumi, are you really leaving just like that? I still have so much to say to you. Don't go, please come back." Takumi didn't turn around, simply raising a hand to wave goodbye. Bartolomeo was disheartened. Just then, one of his subordinates came running over, holding a small wooden box. "Boss, I found something good. An Akuma no Mi." Back at the Roger Tavern. When the tavern owner returned, Takumi was long gone. He stared at the empty wine racks, stunned, letting the bag of food in his hand drop to the floor. "No way. That kid left too?" The tavern owner quickly ran to the cellar behind the bar and opened the door, only to find that all the wine was gone. Staring at the million berry Takumi had left in the cellar, the tavern owner's feelings were a mix of emotions. Chapter 50. Chapter 50. Drum Island, a town in turmoil. The world of One Piece is divided into 4 seas: East, West, North, and South, by the Red Line, with the Grand Line being the most perilous and mysterious sea route that intersects it. Takumi's next stop for his sign-in task was Drum Island, which lies within the Grand Line. For anyone from the 4 seas to enter the Grand Line, they either have to navigate through Reverse Mountain or cross the Calm Belt. Reverse Mountain, also known as Twin Cape, has 5 waterways forming an X shape. 4 of these streams flow upward, connecting the East, South, West, and North Seas, and the last stream flows down into the Grand Line. Navigating through Reverse Mountain is treacherous. The water currents are violent, and many ships don't make it through. Even if they reach the summit, one wrong move can send them plummeting off the mountain instead of flowing into the Grand Line. Given the small boat Takumi was using, there was no chance of safely navigating through Reverse Mountain. So, his only option was to cross the Calm Belt to reach the Grand Line. The Calm Belt is an area of the sea where there's no wind and no currents, making it eerily calm. Once a ship enters, it becomes stranded. On top of that, the Calm Belt is teeming with massive sea kings. Knowing this, Takumi specifically purchased a small rowboat without a sail when he left Loguetown. Following the system's guidance, Takumi sailed through the East Blue for 3 days before entering the Calm Belt. As soon as he did, 2 large sea kings tried to attack him. Not wanting to waste time, Takumi simply glared at them, using his conqueror's Haki to scare off all the sea kings that dared to approach him. After nearly 5 days of rowing through the Calm Belt, Takumi finally entered the Grand Line. At first, the weather was sunny, but within the blink of an eye, dark clouds rolled in, and a fierce thunderstorm broke out. The weather on the Grand Line is unpredictable, defying all logic. The sea currents are chaotic too. Even when sailing in a straight line, you can find yourself drifting off course without even realizing it. Despite having the system's navigation, Takumi found himself constantly adjusting to stay on course. After nearly a month of navigating the treacherous waters of the Grand Line, and with his alcohol supply running low, Takumi finally spotted a winter island with a few drum-shaped peaks. As he got closer, the temperature dropped significantly. Takumi quickly pulled out the winter clothes he had stashed in his system storage and bundled up. The small boat drifted toward the snow-covered shores of Drum Island. At the same time, a fleet of ships was rapidly leaving the island. As Takumi's boat passed by some of these ships, he noticed that many of the people on board were wiping away tears, their faces filled with sorrow. Most of them were dressed in the white protective gear typical of doctors. From what Takumi remembered, Drum Island was still a renowned medical kingdom at this point. But it was destined to decline under the tyrannical rule of Wapol, who would eventually exile or hunt down all the doctors on the island, keeping only 20 for himself. The once proud medical kingdom would soon crumble. Judging by the situation, it seemed that Takumi had arrived just as Wapol was beginning his brutal hunt and exile of the island's doctors. Hey look! There's a kid over there. How could a child be sailing the Grand Line alone? Did he survive a shipwreck? Kid, you shouldn't head to Drum Kingdom. It's too dangerous now. Get on our ship, and we'll take you with us. People on the deck of the nearest ship called out to Takumi, their voices full of concern. But Takumi simply shook his head and said, "Thanks, but no need." With that, he continued steering his small boat toward Drum Island. Despite the many warnings, Takumi ignored them all. Soon, his boat touched the snow-covered shore of Drum Island. As soon as he stepped off the boat onto the island, the system's announcement echoed in his mind. Ding! Congratulations! You've reached the sign-in location, Drum Island. Progress plus 10%. Current total progress, 10%. Reward, beginner-level mystical palm technique. In an instant, knowledge of the mystical palm technique flooded Takumi's mind. This medical ninjutsu from Naruto was capable of healing both internal and external injuries at an impressive rate by channeling chakra. It didn't even require close contact. It could heal from a meter away. All in all, it was an incredibly useful skill. Pulling his coat tighter around him, Takumi set off into the island. As he walked, he passed many people hurrying in the opposite direction, carrying heavy luggage. Takumi didn't need to ask for directions. He simply followed the flow of people for about half an hour until he arrived in a small town filled with one-story brick houses. The town was in chaos. The residents were in a panic, fleeing in every direction. Takumi had planned to find a tavern and have a drink. But after wandering around the town, the only tavern he found was closed. Even the town's 2 inns had their doors shut, refusing to take in guests. Standing in the cold wind, surrounded by the chaotic streets, Takumi felt the cold biting through his heavy coat. Even wrapped up as he was, the chill was hard to endure after being outside for too long. Especially for someone like Takumi, who had never experienced such cold before. Just then, a squad of the Drum Kingdom's guard unit, a group of men dressed in matching black coats and armed with rifles, rushed into the town. Each of them carried a stack of papers with photos and names of all the doctors on Drum Island. They began searching the panicked crowd for their targets. Whenever they found a doctor, they would immediately apprehend them. Those who resisted were shot on the spot. This was the doctor hunting policy decreed by the current ruler of the Drum Kingdom, Wapple. Soon, the sound of gunfire echoed through the town. One of the guards chased a target in Takumi's direction. The terrified person being chased ran past Takumi. Seeing Takumi in the way, the guard shouted, "Get out of the way, kid!" Takumi didn't budge, turning a cold gaze toward the rapidly approaching guard. With no alcohol to drink and no warm inn to stay in, Takumi was not in the mood to be messed with. "Hey, I said move. Don't you understand?" The guard snarled, reaching out to shove Takumi aside. But Takumi sidestepped, avoiding the guard's hand. As the guard rushed past him, Takumi calmly raised his hand and delivered a swift, precise blow to the guard's back, knocking him face first into the snow. Chapter 51. Chapter 51. Drum Island. That kid is a monster. The guard who had been knocked down by Takumi spat out a mouthful of snow and ice. His companions, instead of helping him, burst out laughing at his defeat by a child. "Hey, Will, what's wrong with you? Can't even handle a kid? All that size for nothing, ha ha ha. Man, you're useless. You've embarrassed the entire guard squad. Don't tell anyone you know us. That little brat? I could take down 10 of them with just one finger. And you got taken out? That's hilarious." Will, the guard lying on the ground, clenched his fists in anger, his face turning red with humiliation. He scrambled to his feet, glaring furiously at Takumi, who was standing calmly, and hissed through gritted teeth, "You! It's all your fault, you little bastard. I'm going to kill you for this." Without another word, Will grabbed his gun and aimed it at Takumi, pulling the trigger without hesitation. The bullet shot towards Takumi, but he simply reached out and caught it mid-air, crushing it with his Haki-infused hand before casually tossing the fragments to the ground. Will's fierce expression faltered, replaced by one of utter disbelief and fear. Even the guards who had been mocking him stood frozen, their laughter dying on their lips. No way. He caught that bullet bare-handed and crushed it? Impossible. I must be seeing things. The cold must be messing with my head. But as they rubbed their eyes and looked again at Takumi, the crushed bullet shards glinting in the snow were all too real. The sight made them instinctively step back. Takumi started walking towards Will, who was now trembling so much that his legs gave out, sending him collapsing back into the snow. To Will, this seemingly frail boy now looked like a demon, an unstoppable force that he could neither fight nor flee from. Standing over him, Takumi asked in a cold voice, "Which way to the next town?" Takumi knew that Drum Island had more than just this port town. There had to be others. Will stammered, "Why, you mean Cocoa Weed Town?" Takumi responded with a simple, "Yes." Still trembling, Will pointed in the direction of Cocoa Weed Town. Takumi walked past him without another word, heading in the direction Will had indicated. He hadn't gotten far when a few more guards, who hadn't witnessed Takumi's previous feat, arrived on the scene. They saw Will and the others standing there, dumbfounded, watching the back of a child as he walked away. One of the newly arrived guards shouted in irritation, "Hey! What are you guys doing just standing around? Did you forget our mission?" "And no, it's not that," Will stammered, pointing at Takumi with a shaky finger. "That kid. He's a monster." "Monster?" The guard blinked, then burst out laughing. "You've got to be kidding me. That kid? He looks like any other brat. How could he be a monster?" "It's true," Will insisted. "Yeah, we saw it too. He crushed a bullet with his bare hands." The other guards chimed in, pointing at the bullet fragments now almost buried in the snow. The new arrivals glanced at the snow-covered debris, but they just laughed harder. "Are you seriously trying to tell me that those tiny bits are bullets? If you didn't want to work, you could have come up with a better excuse. Ha ha ha." "It's true. Those pieces really are bullets. I swear," Will pleaded, his voice shaking. Annoyed, one of the guards raised his gun, aiming it at the back of Takumi's head. "Enough of this nonsense. I'll prove it by blowing this kid's head off. Then you'll see there's nothing special about him." With that, he fired. The bullet zoomed towards Takumi, but just before it could make contact, Takumi tilted his head slightly, letting the bullet skim past his hair and hit a pine tree behind him, piercing straight through it. "Huh?" The shooter paused, thinking it must have been a fluke. He fired twice more in quick succession. Both bullets were aimed directly at Takumi, but with a casual movement, he avoided them both. "This can't be happening," the shooter muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. Everyone, open fire. There's no way he can dodge all our bullets. All the guards, except for Will and those who had already witnessed Takumi's strength, raised their guns and started shooting wildly. A storm of bullets rained down on Takumi. With a resigned sigh, Takumi stopped walking and turned to face the barrage. With a mere thought, he summoned his power, creating a glowing golden sphere around himself, his fairy sphere. Ever since acquiring the fairy sphere, Takumi hadn't had a chance to use it. Now seemed as good a time as any to test it out. Every bullet that struck the fairy sphere lost all its momentum, harmlessly clattering to the ground. When the last bullet finally fell, Takumi deactivated the sphere and looked coldly at the group of shocked, gaping guards. Without a word, he unleashed a wave of Conqueror's Haki, causing the terrified men to collapse, unconscious. With that, Takumi turned back around and continued on his way to Cocoa Weed Town. Once he was out of sight, the townspeople, who had been hiding behind their houses, finally dared to peek out, their faces a mix of shock and fear. Takumi walked through the snow for another half-hour before he finally reached Cocoa Weed Town. However, it wasn't much better than the town he'd just left. The royal guards had already ransacked this place too, and the remaining townspeople were busy cleaning up, their faces showing a mixture of anger and despair. As Takumi walked through the town, he saw a man run out of his house, holding a young girl burning with fever. Tears streaked down the man's face as he cried out in desperation. "Is there a doctor? Please, is there any doctor still hiding here? I'm begging you, please save my daughter." But the only response was a chorus of sorrowful sighs. The man fell to his knees in the snow, clutching his daughter tightly. "Is there a tavern in this town?" Takumi asked as he approached the man, his expression cold and detached. The man, tears streaming down his face, looked up at Takumi. He was about to shout at him, but then thought better of it and said through sobs, "There's no tavern here. Only the town near the port has one." The man didn't scold Takumi, but the townspeople around him began to murmur angrily. "What's with this kid? Can't he see the man's in pain? And he's asking about a tavern? Yeah, who raised this brat? No sense of empathy at all. No manners whatsoever." Takumi ignored their muttering and instead pointed at 2 bottles of alcohol on a shelf inside the man's house. "Can I take those?" The man gritted his teeth in sadness but eventually sighed. "What's wrong with you?" "Ugh, fine. Take them if you want." Takumi nodded slightly and walked into the house, retrieving the 2 bottles. As he walked back out, he approached the man and held out his hand, hovering it half a meter above the girl's forehead. A soft green light began to emanate from Takumi's hand, gently flowing into the girl's body. The man was about to yell at Takumi, demanding to know what he was doing, but then he noticed his daughter stir. He quickly looked down and saw that the redness in her fevered face was slowly fading, her skin returning to its normal color. Stunned, the man reached out to touch her forehead, only to exclaim in shock, "Her fever's gone!" Chapter 52. Chapter 52. Drum Island, the book-thieving boy, Trafalgar. After healing the girl with his abilities, Takumi left the man's house, carrying the 2 bottles of liquor he had taken, his expression indifferent. The man, overwhelmed with emotion, hugged his daughter tightly and called out to Takumi, who was already walking away, "Thank you. Thank you so much. What's your name, kind sir?" Takumi didn't respond, continuing on his way without looking back. The townspeople around them were left in a state of disbelief. What just happened? How did Julio's daughter suddenly get better? It's incredible. His hand was glowing just now. Was that light what healed her? Who is that kid? Does anyone know him? No idea. There are only a few towns on Drum Island, and the style of his coat doesn't look like something made here. Oh, so he took the liquor as payment for healing Julio's daughter. We misunderstood him. Great, I even said he was ill-mannered. What if he holds a grudge against me? Takumi ignored the murmuring behind him, casually opening the bottles and pouring the liquor into his gourd as he walked. Once the gourd was full, he drained the remaining half bottle in one long gulp. The taste of the liquor was mediocre, but it was better than nothing. The warmth of the alcohol spread through his body, driving away the chill. After walking for a bit, Takumi came across a small inn that was still open. Without hesitation, he went inside, booked a room for 7 days, and settled in. He enjoyed a comfortable sleep, and by the time he woke up, it was already dark outside. Feeling a bit hungry, Takumi decided to go out and find something to eat. As he stepped out of the inn, he noticed a boy in the distance. The boy was wearing a furry winter hat with leopard spots, gold earrings hanging from his ears, and had dark circles under his eyes. He wore a long black coat and was carrying a stack of books. The The boy, taller than Takumi by a head, was hurrying past a row of houses. Wait, that's Trafalgar? Trafalgar was a nickname that Luffy would one day give to a man named Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. In Takumi's memory, Trafalgar Law had suffered great loss as a child, losing his loved ones. At 10 years old, he joined the Don Quixote family to exact revenge on the world. However, he was later saved and reformed by Corazon, Doflamingo's younger brother. At 13, after Corazon was killed by Doflamingo, Law left the Don Quixote family to avenge him and eventually founded the Heart Pirates, earning fame across the seas. Judging by the timeline, Law should be around 13 or 14 years old right now. Takumi could tell that there were no Don Quixote family members nearby, and Corazon was nowhere to be seen. This likely meant that Corazon had already died. As for Law, he must have already left the Don Quixote family and was probably preparing to form the Heart Pirates. Law, sensing someone watching him, turned his gaze towards Takumi. Their eyes met. Law hesitated, but before he could think further, 2 large men came rushing after him. Hey, you little brat. Stop right there and put those books down. I've seen people steal money and food, but this is the first time I've seen someone steal books. Hey kid, stop. Realizing that he was being chased, Law immediately took off running. He didn't get far before he was blocked by some townspeople who had come to help. Clutching the books tightly, Law's face grew tense as he retreated a few steps. The townspeople surrounded him, and one of the men who had been chasing him quickly reached for the books in Law's hands. Let go. Law growled through gritted teeth. You little thief, you think you're in the right? The man snapped, grabbing the books with one hand while using the other to hoist Law up by his collar, trying to wrest the books from his grip. But it was as if the books were glued to Law's hands, and no matter how hard the man pulled, he couldn't pry them away. Damn it, you've got some strength for a kid. Let go before I have to knock you out. Yeah, let go, kid. You're still young, there's time to make things right. Stop being stubborn, boy. You're in the wrong here, so just give the books back. The surrounding townspeople urged him to comply. Law bit down harder, his face grim. Your country is about to lose all its doctors, so what good are these medical books to you? Sooner or later, they'll become contraband here. Before that happens, you might as well give them to me. The man trying to take the books faltered, his aggression fading. The previously noisy crowd of townspeople fell silent, and the atmosphere grew somber. The man set Law down, his body trembling slightly as he spoke, his voice tinged with anger. What do you know? You're just a child, what could you possibly understand? Maybe these books will become contraband one day, but that day isn't here yet. And until then, we need to protect them. We can't save our country if we can't even hold on to these books. The man finished speaking and covered his eyes with his arm, beginning to sob. The townspeople around them sighed in unison. Law held the books even tighter, frustration simmering within him. His purpose for coming to Drum Island had been to improve his medical skills. After all, this island was renowned for its medical expertise. But as soon as he arrived, he encountered the king's decree to hunt down and exile the doctors. With no one to turn to for guidance, Law could only rely on these medical books to learn on his own. Though he was still a child, only 14 years old, his strength was more than enough to take down these townspeople. But seeing the suffering of this country's people under a tyrannical rule reminded him too much of his own past. Law understood their pain. That's why he hadn't resorted to violence. But what use would it be to leave these medical books behind? Medicine isn't something you can learn just by reading a few books. You can't become a healer overnight. Law had been born into a family of doctors, learning the basics of medicine from his parents. If it hadn't been for the tragedy that struck his hometown when he was 10, he might have already become an outstanding doctor by now. Do you even know how to read these books? Law asked, his voice devoid of emotion. The townspeople remained silent. Law continued, learning medicine on your own is nearly impossible for someone without a background. Keeping these books is a waste. I don't want to hurt any of you, but I'm not leaving without these books. Don't even think about taking them from me. Kid, you know how to practice medicine? The man who had tried to take the books asked, surprised. Law nodded expressionlessly. At that moment, a small figure emerged from behind the crowd, calmly walking past. Look, it's the kid who used some kind of magic to heal Julio's daughter, someone shouted. All eyes immediately shifted to Takumi, who had been about to go find something to eat. Chapter 53. Chapter 53. Drum Island. Join my crew as the first mate. Yes, that's the kid. He's the one who saved Julio's daughter. Really? But he looks so young. Are you sure it wasn't a mistake? No mistake at all. I was there too. This kid didn't even touch Julio's daughter, and yet he healed her completely. Kid, how did you do it? Tell us. The crowd buzzed with conversation. Seeing that everyone's attention had shifted towards him, Takumi initially had no intention of engaging with them. But after a moment, he asked, which restaurant is still open? Huh? A restaurant? Most places should be closed by now, but I saw that the new Dawn ramen shop was still open when I passed by earlier. Just keep going straight, and you'll see it. The kid must be hungry. Do you have money? If not, you can come eat at my house. Yeah, you can come eat at my place too. The townspeople were suddenly very welcoming, as if they were completely different from the ones who had scolded Takumi earlier. Takumi ignored them and continued on his way. From the moment the townspeople's attention shifted, Law glanced at Takumi, recognizing him as the person he had locked eyes with earlier. Listening to the townspeople's chatter, it seemed this person also knew medicine, some sort of strange technique. Who is he? Law asked, still watching Takumi's retreating figure. The townspeople around him shook their heads, indicating they didn't know. We don't know. Julio asked his name earlier, but he didn't answer, one of the townspeople replied. Law asked further, how did he heal the girl? It was like this. Another townsman mimicked Takumi's previous gesture, extending his hand palm down. He held his hand about half a meter above the girl's head like this, and then his hand started to glow with a green light. The light slowly merged into the girl's body, and her fever went down. It was truly incredible. I've never seen anything like it. That's right. It was my first time seeing something like that too. That kid is amazing. I really want to know how he did it. Me too. It's a shame that kid is so aloof. He doesn't like talking to people. Oh, I almost forgot to warn him. This country is driving out all the doctors. If the guard squad finds out he knows medicine, they'll kick him out for sure. Huh? Do you even need to say that? He came from the port, so he must already know, right? I'm not sure. I think someone should remind him, just in case. But that kid is really cold. I'm not going. Anyone else? The townspeople began pushing the task onto each other. Law, clutching a stack of medical books, stared at Takumi's departing figure. At that moment, the man who had been trying to retrieve the books suddenly spoke up. These books give us a sliver of hope, a sense of possibility. We know not everyone can learn medicine, but I also want to see these books put to good use. Kid, do you really love and want to learn advanced medical techniques? Law withdrew his gaze, turning to the man, tightening his grip on the books, and nodded firmly. Yes. The man smiled, resigned. In that case, take the books. But in return, you have to go tell that kid not to reveal that he knows medicine. I can see that you're interested in him too. Go on. Law looked at the man, nodded slightly, and immediately ran off in the direction Takumi had gone, clutching the medical books tightly. Braving the wind and snow, Takumi walked for 5 minutes and soon arrived at his destination. New Dawn Ramen Shop. Since it was dinner time, the ramen shop was already filled with customers. Takumi walked in, ordered a bowl of their signature ramen, and seeing that they sold alcohol, bought 2 more bottles. He then sat down at the only empty table, a 4-person booth in the dining hall. The ramen hadn't arrived yet, so Takumi took a sip of his drink. Law caught up, glanced around, and spotted Takumi. He walked over and sat across from him. Law, his face emotionless, said, "The townspeople sent me to tell you not to reveal that you know medicine, or else the guards will kick you out of the country." Takumi responded with a casual, "Oh." Law stared at him in silence. Takumi continued to drink without a care. Finally, the ramen arrived. Takumi picked up the chopsticks and began to eat. The aroma of the ramen drifted over to Law, who couldn't help but swallow hard as his stomach growled audibly. "Damn it," Law muttered, his face reddening. He quickly grabbed the pot of hot water on the table and poured himself a cup, downing it in one gulp. Takumi glanced at him and immediately understood. This guy had no money. Moreover, although Law had a sword with him, it wasn't the one Takumi remembered as the legendary blade, Kikoku. This led Takumi to assume that Law probably hadn't yet mastered his devil fruit powers. Indeed, Law was a devil fruit user. He possessed the powers of the Op no Mi. The Op no Mi allows its user to create a spherical space, known as a room, within which the user can manipulate anything, including dismembering people without harming them or swapping their minds. Those cut by the ability don't die or even bleed. They remain alive with a slight sense of pain. Law's ability, unlike normal swordsmanship, allows him to reassemble whatever he cuts, making it fundamentally different from typical slashing attacks. This power can even target Logia-type users' physical bodies. If wielded by someone with enough talent, The Op Nomi can even grant eternal life, though the user dies upon performing this operation. In short, the Op Nomi is a highly formidable devil fruit. However, its powers have a drawback. They drain the user's stamina severely and can even shorten the user's lifespan if overused. Noticing the two swords at Takumi's waist, Law hesitated but finally asked as Takumi neared the end of his ramen, "Are you a swordsman?" After finishing the last sip of soup, Takumi wiped his mouth and replied, "You could say that." "You could say that?" Law echoed, surprised. He touched the sword on his back and asked, "Did you come to Drum Island alone?" "Yeah." Takumi stood up, ready to leave. Law quickly stood as well, following him. "I'm alone too, and I also use a sword and no medicine. We're kind of similar in some ways." "Takumi," Law continued, "what's your name?" Takumi ignored him. Law didn't mind the cold shoulder and pressed on, "I've started a pirate crew, and I'm looking for crew members. If you're on your own, how about joining my crew? I'll make you my first mate." Chapter 54. Chapter 54. Drum Island, Law's determination. In Takumi's mind, Law was supposed to be someone who was sharp, cold, calm, and defiantly independent. But now? What's going on? This guy doesn't even know his name and is already inviting him to join his crew? Takumi shook his head, finding the situation almost comical. "I'm going to have to pass on that." Law blinked in surprise and quickly said, "You should really think about it. I'm serious about this." Takumi's answer was still the same. "I'm just a traveler. Becoming a pirate isn't on my to-do list." "A traveler?" Law frowned, clearly skeptical. "If you're going to brush me off, at least come up with something more believable." "Traveler sounds like an excuse." Takumi glanced at him, unfazed. "Brush you off? Why would I need to do that?" With that, Takumi let out a small chuckle and kept walking forward. At that moment, a voice rang out in Takumi's mind, startling him for a second. "Ding ding. You've refused Surgeon of Death Law's invitation to join his crew. Sign in progress increased by 20%. Current total progress, 30%. Reward, Master Level Palm Healing Technique." Suddenly, more advanced knowledge about the palm healing technique flooded Takumi's mind, and he paused to process it. Meanwhile, Law's stomach growled again, loudly this time. Takumi looked back at him. Blushing slightly, Law turned his head away and muttered, "What are you looking at? Fine, don't join if you don't want to. It's not like I absolutely need you in my crew." Takumi couldn't help but smile. He reached into his pocket. Actually, he was pulling something out of his system storage, and tossed a small pouch of belly toward Law. Law caught it out of instinct. Looking down at the money bag, Law's brow furrowed, and he snapped, "What's this for? Are you trying to insult me? Turning down free money. Are you sure you're cut out to be a pirate?" Takumi chuckled softly and walked out of the ramen shop. Takumi had a couple of reasons for giving Law the money. First, it was a small way to say thanks for helping him progress in his sign-in mission. Second, if Law was anything like Zoro or others he'd met, he might keep pestering him. And since Law was clearly hungry, it made sense to leave him in the ramen shop with something to eat. By the time Takumi stepped outside, night had fully fallen. Drum Island was always covered in snow, and the streets were blanketed in a thick layer. It made more sense to head back to the warmth of the inn rather than wandering around in the freezing cold. So, Takumi didn't stick around in the town. He stopped by a convenience store, bought all the bottles of liquor they had, and then headed straight back to his inn. The next couple of days were quiet. Takumi mostly stayed in his room, only going out when it was time to eat. On the third day after arriving on Drum Island, Takumi woke up early, left the inn, and started heading toward the island's most prominent feature, those towering mountains that looked like giant drums. The weather was brutal, with the wind and snow battering him as he walked. Takumi pressed on, leaving deep footprints in the snow behind him. He was on his way to find Chopper. Based on his past experiences with sign-in tasks, Takumi was pretty sure that whatever he needed to do on Drum Island would involve Chopper. Chopper was still a young reindeer, probably about 5 years old at this point. He was born with a blue nose, which made him an outcast among the other reindeer. They bullied him, and eventually, after eating the Hito Hito no Mi, human fruit, they drove him out of the herd. Chopper just wanted to find friends, so he used his newfound ability to transform into a human in an attempt to blend in with people. But his transformation wasn't perfect. He still had a blue nose and other features that weren't entirely human. People mistook him for a monster, just like the reindeer had, and drove him away. Some even tried to shoot him. Chopper had no idea what he had done wrong. He didn't know who to be angry at. He just wanted friends, But everyone treated him like a monster. He was no longer a reindeer, but he wasn't a human either. He was alone in the world, at least until he met Dr. Hirulek. Hirulek was a quack doctor who spent the latter part of his life researching the miracle of cherry blossoms. He never charged for his services, even though Drum Kingdom had driven out all the other doctors, leaving the townspeople without anyone to treat them. Despite that, no one wanted Hirulek's help. That's because his so-called miracle cures didn't heal people. In fact, they often made their conditions worse. At this point, Chopper probably hadn't met Hirulek yet. As Takumi continued walking, lost in thought, suddenly, from the snow-covered forest beside him, a creature with the body of a bear and the head of a rabbit, a Lapon, burst out at lightning speed, charging straight at him. Lapons were fierce predators native to Drum Island, known for their aggression and pack behavior. They were definitely not friendly. As this lone Lapon was about to strike Takumi with its sharp claws, before Takumi could react, a shadowy figure suddenly appeared. With a swift slash, the Lapon was taken down just a meter behind Takumi. "Takumi, are you all right?" Law asked, panting. Takumi stopped in his tracks, turning to look at him. How did he know his name? Seeing the confusion on Takumi's face, Law explained, "The innkeeper told me." Since Takumi had registered at the inn, the innkeeper knew his name. Talk about loose lips. Oh well, no big deal. Takumi didn't say anything and resumed walking. Seeing him leave, Law quickly caught up, asking as they walked, "The townspeople said you have some strange technique that can heal people. Is that true?" Takumi didn't respond. Law wasn't deterred and kept going. "I came to Drum Island to learn more advanced medical techniques. I'm really interested in this technique you have. Could you teach me?" "No," Takumi finally answered, flatly turning him down. Law hesitated but continued following Takumi. "I know you don't have to teach me anything, but I have a reason to learn advanced medical techniques." Law touched his chest, his expression serious. "I won't let anyone important die in front of me again. If I had known more back then, maybe Corazon wouldn't have died." As he spoke, Law began to tremble. The memory of Corazon's death was still raw, and in this cold, snowy landscape, his frail frame seemed even more fragile. It looked like a strong gust of wind could knock him over. Takumi didn't respond. What could he say, really? Even if he wanted to teach Law, it wouldn't help. The palm healing technique required chakra, something that people in this world didn't possess. So, there was no way Law could ever learn it. Takumi continued walking. Law watched Takumi's back, deep in thought, before catching up again. "Takumi, are you really not going to teach me?" Takumi sighed. "That's right." Law frowned. "Why not?" Just as Law asked, the forest around them suddenly came alive with the sound of howls. Several agile shadows darted between the trees, and in moments, a pack of fierce Lapons surrounded Takumi and Law. Chapter 55. Chapter 55. Drum Island, Chopper. Lapons are fiercely territorial and loyal creatures. Clearly, this group of Lapons was here to avenge the one Law had taken down earlier. Law's face grew serious as he eyed the surrounding Lapons, which were poised to attack, looking ready to tear them apart at any moment. "Takumi, don't worry, I'll protect you," Law said, gripping his sword tightly. If it were just a few Lapons, Law was confident he could handle them. But against a whole pack? That was a different story. "Perfect chance to test out my new ability," Law muttered, quickly freeing up one hand. Room! Suddenly, a transparent, dome-shaped space appeared, enveloping all the Lapons, and Takumi as well. Inside the room, Law moved with lightning speed, slicing at the Lapons around him. The Lapons, however, were quick to react, shifting positions with remarkable agility. Although Law could almost teleport within the room, his strength wasn't on par with the Lapons. Shambles! Law gritted his teeth as he swung his sword at the nearest Lapon, neatly severing one of its arms. The severed arm hit the ground, but not a drop of blood was spilled. Even the Lapon, now missing an arm, bore a perfectly smooth cut with no blood loss. Shambles was an ability that allowed Law to dismember and rearrange objects or living beings within his control. The severed creatures wouldn't die, feel pain, or bleed. It was an impressive power, but only if Law could actually hit his target. The Lapon that had lost an arm briefly hesitated before charging at Law again with a furious roar. The other Lapons, having witnessed Law's strange ability, became more cautious. As Law prepared to sever the creature's other arm, a few Lapons suddenly attacked him from behind, slapping him away with their powerful paws. "Damn it!" Law cursed, spitting out a mouthful of snow as he struggled to get back on his feet, determined to keep fighting. But before he could make a move, several Lapons turned their attention to Takumi. leaping at him from all directions. "Watch out!" Law shouted. Takumi sighed as he watched the Lapons descend on him. With a swift motion, he drew his sword, the Sandai Katetsu, and used his flash step technique. In an instant, all the attacking Lapons were sent flying backward. The remaining Lapons, seeing their companions taken down so easily, snarled and bared their teeth before rushing at Takumi all at once. Takumi snorted, unimpressed. Right in front of Law, he waited until the Lapons were almost upon him, then unleashed another quick slash. All the Lapons froze in place. Takumi sheathed his sword slowly. As the sword clicked into place, the Lapons fell to the ground with a thud. Law stood there stunned. That was incredible. Without saying a word, Takumi walked past the fallen Lapons and continued on his way. Law quickly dismissed his room and hurried after Takumi, not bothering to say anything more. For the rest of the time, Law trailed behind Takumi, keeping his questions to himself. He wanted to ask where Takumi was heading, but he knew that even if he did, Takumi probably wouldn't answer. It seemed more practical to just follow him and see for himself. Walking through the snowy terrain, especially with the wind and snow beating down on them, slowed their pace considerably. Takumi didn't mind Law tagging along as long as he didn't start nagging him. Thanks to his observation Haki, Takumi detected several areas where deer were active. He found a few herds of reindeer but didn't spot Chopper among them. As the day grew darker, Takumi decided to turn back and head toward Cocoa Weed Town. Law had followed him all day. He still didn't know exactly what Takumi was up to, but from watching him, he had a hunch that Takumi was searching for someone, or rather, some reindeer. Before returning to the inn, Takumi stopped at a random restaurant for a meal, then hit up a convenience store where he bought a bunch of food and alcohol before heading back. Once in his room, he stored the food and alcohol in his system space. For the next 2 months, Takumi kept up this routine. Every morning, he would leave the inn early to search for Chopper, then return in the evening, gradually stocking up on supplies. After 2 months of consistent effort, his system space was finally full. One morning, as Takumi prepared to head out and continue his search for Chopper, he hadn't even walked a few steps out of the inn when he noticed a group of men armed with hunting rifles rushing toward the back of the town. "Did you hear? That snow monster's shown up again," one of them said. "Snow monster? You mean that blue-nosed freak that looks like a person?" Another replied. "Yeah, that monster. I heard it went to the neighboring town a while back and got hurt by the folks there. It's probably back now to get revenge," the first man continued. "Huh? If it's looking for revenge, it should go after the guys in the other town, not come here," a third man chimed in. As Takumi listened to the townspeople talking, he frowned and quickly changed direction, heading toward where they said the monster had appeared. He was certain that the monster they were talking about was Chopper, the reindeer he had been searching for. Law, who had come out of the inn as usual, overheard the townspeople's conversation too. Before he could process it, he noticed Takumi heading off after the group of armed men and immediately followed him. Takumi and Law soon arrived at the back of the town, in front of a pine forest. The armed townspeople had their rifles aimed at a large figure hiding behind one of the pine trees. "Get lost, you freak!" one of them shouted. "Yeah, get out of here, you monster!" another yelled. "Scram!" the crowd demanded, anger and fear in their voices. The creature they were yelling at was Chopper, who had transformed using the Hito Hito no Mi. He was in his human reindeer hybrid form, with fur still covering his chest and shoulders, and his nose remained a bright blue. Even from several hundred meters away, with the wind and snow making visibility difficult, Takumi could clearly see the countless wounds covering Chopper's body. "That's the snow monster they're talking about?" Law said, his voice filled with confusion. "I've read about snow monsters in books before. They're supposed to be some kind of vicious ape-like creature. But this guy, he doesn't look vicious at all. In fact, he doesn't look anything like what the books described. Maybe the townspeople are mistaken?" Takumi glanced at Law briefly. At that moment, a gunshot rang out. One of the armed townsmen had fired at Chopper. Chopper recoiled in fear, stumbling back a few steps. But before the bullet could reach him, Takumi was there in a flash, appearing in front of Chopper and effortlessly catching the bullet in his hand, crushing it to dust. Chapter 56. Chapter 56. Drum Island. Going with the flow. Takumi crushed the bullet in his hand, leaving everyone around him stunned. It took a while before the crowd could even react. "Hey, isn't that the kid who saved Julio's daughter? When did he get here? Did he really just crush that bullet? How is that even possible? Can a normal person do that? This is terrifying. Who is that kid, really? And why would he save the snow monster? Has he lost his mind?" Takumi couldn't care less about what these people were saying. He turned to glance at Chopper, who was barely standing, his body trembling from the wounds he had suffered. Honestly, Takumi didn't have to interfere. If the story unfolded the way it was supposed to, Chopper wouldn't die from a few gunshots. But the look in Chopper's eyes, a look of deep pain and despair, far worse than any physical injury, made Takumi hesitate. "Run," Takumi said calmly. His tone was indifferent, without much emotion. Yet to Chopper, who had been tormented and rejected by both reindeer and humans, these words carried immense meaning. This human. He's different from the others. That was all Chopper could think as gunshots rang out again. Someone had circled around, trying to hit Chopper from the side. Takumi raised his hand and caught the bullet aimed at Chopper, crushing it to dust. Startled, Chopper instinctively stepped back. Takumi looked at him again and repeated, "Run." Without another word, Chopper turned and bolted into the pine forest. At that moment, a familiar notification sounded in Takumi's mind. Beep. Helping Chopper escape danger and earning his favor. Sign in progress increased by 20%. Current total progress, 50%. Reward, Fairy Sphere skill level increased by 1. Current Fairy Sphere level, LV2. Instantly, Takumi felt a deeper understanding of the Fairy Sphere ability. He couldn't help but think back to the past 2 months, when he had searched high and low for Chopper, only to come up empty-handed. And now, Chopper had just shown up on his own. I guess when it comes to these sign-in tasks, it's better to just go with the flow, Takumi thought to himself. With that, he decided not to chase after Chopper. Instead, he took a detour, walking past the crowd and heading back into the town. "Hey kid! Do you realize what you just did?" One of the men yelled. "You let the snow monster go. Do you have any idea how dangerous that thing is? That creature's nothing but trouble." Another shouted. "Yeah, you shouldn't have saved that monster. If you're so strong, why didn't you just help us kill it?" Someone else added. As Takumi walked past the group of armed men, they bombarded him with complaints. Ignoring them, Takumi kept walking, not interested in engaging. But Law, unable to stay silent, shouted back. "Are you guys sure that was the snow monster? Did it hurt any of you? Did it do anything wrong?" Law's questions left the crowd speechless. After a moment of awkward silence, the townspeople began to grumble again. "It hasn't hurt us yet, but do we really have to wait until it does before we take action?" Exactly. Even if it's not the snow monster, it's still a freakish creature. Half human, half something else. Monsters like that are dangerous, no matter what. Even if we don't kill it, we can't let it near our town. Law was shocked by how deep-seated the people's prejudice was against the creature, who clearly wasn't the snow monster they feared. Frustrated, Law clenched his fists and continued. "Have you ever tried talking to it? Do you even know what it wants? Do you really know if it's dangerous or not? Talk to a monster? Are you crazy, kid? Seriously?" One man scoffed. "We don't have time to get to know a monster. If we let it get too close, who knows what it might do? It could kill us in an instant. Yeah, that creature might be trying to trick us by pretending to be harmless, thinking it can fool us. Ha! It's insulting if it thinks we'd fall for that. How ridiculous." Law was furious. He realized that no matter what he said, he wouldn't be able to change these people's minds about Chopper. Arguing with these ignorant, narrow-minded people felt like a waste of time. Realizing this, Law decided to drop it and turn to catch up with Takumi. Ever since Takumi had stepped in to shield Chopper from the bullets, Law had suspected that the creature Takumi had been searching for over the past 2 months was none other than the misunderstood snow monster. At first, Law couldn't understand why Takumi hadn't said a word in defense of Chopper, especially when the townspeople were so hostile toward him. But now, he got it. There was no point in arguing with people who were so stubbornly set in their ways. Sometimes, staying silent was the better option. After all, nothing would change. No matter how much was said, it wouldn't make a difference. At least, that's what Law thought. In reality, Takumi simply didn't feel like talking. Soon after, news of Takumi's ability to crush bullets with his bare hands spread throughout Cocoa Weed Town. Meanwhile, Takumi himself had already left the town, heading toward the small town near the harbor. It had been a while since he'd visited a tavern, and today seemed like a good day to enjoy a drink. After walking for over half an hour, Takumi arrived at the only town on Drum Island with an open tavern. When he stepped inside, it was just like the first time he had walked into the taverns in Fusha Village and Shimatsuki Village. He was met with a chorus of mocking laughter from the patrons. "Well, look what we have here. A little kid in a tavern? Are you lost, kid? If you're looking for juice, You're in the wrong place. The convenience store is next door, ha ha ha. Check him out. He's got 2 swords on his waist and a gourd. What's in there, kid, juice? Ha ha ha. Hey, kid, this isn't the place for you. Go on home, ha ha ha. Takumi ignored the jeers, walking straight to the U-shaped bar and sitting on one of the high stools. Before the bartender could tell him to leave, Takumi pulled out a handful of belly and placed it on the bar. The bartender blinked in surprise. Takumi, his expression unreadable, said, "Give me your best drink." "Ah, sure thing." The bartender quickly pocketed the belly. As far as he was concerned, money was money, whether it came from an adult or a kid. Moments later, the bartender placed a bubbling glass of liquor in front of Takumi. Takumi had just taken his first sip when Law walked in, catching up to him. "So you really did come here to drink," Law said, sitting down beside Takumi. He eyed him incredulously. "You look even younger than me. How can you drink so much?" Takumi didn't respond, simply continuing to enjoy his drink. When he finished the glass and pulled out another handful of belly to order another, the tavern door suddenly burst open. A man in a deep blue coat rushed in, looking panicked. Something's happened. There's trouble in Cocoa Weed Town. Chapter 57, Chapter 57. Drum Island, right and wrong, debts must be paid. What's going on? What happened in Cocoa Weed Town? Come on, speak up, Ken. Could it be that Wapple's goons are at it again? Almost every doctor on the island has been driven out, except for the 20 under his thumb. What more could he want? The crowd was buzzing with speculation. Ken, the man who had brought the news, was gasping for breath as he replied, "It's true that the King's Guard is involved, but they're not after doctors this time. They're after some kid." "Huh? A kid? What kind of kid? What's Wapple planning now? Did he come up with another one of his ridiculous laws?" "There's no new law, at least not yet," Ken continued. "But word has it that Wapple's been looking for a kid who can crush bullets with his bare hands. Just now, I heard that a kid in Cocoa Weed Town crushed a few bullets while trying to save the snow monster. That's what got the King's Guard heading to Cocoa Weed Town." "What? Are you serious? A kid who can crush bullets? You're not making this up, are you?" "No, I'm telling the truth," Ken said seriously. "I also heard that when the King's Guard couldn't find the kid, they took the innkeeper hostage. They said if the kid doesn't come to the castle, they'll kill the innkeeper." "Oh my God, is that true? That poor innkeeper. Wait, did they say what the kid looks like?" "Let me think," Ken paused, recalling the details. "Yeah, they said the kid looks like he's only a few years old, with 2 swords on his waist and a gourd." "Wait a second, are you sure the kid they're looking for is the same one you just described?" Ken looked puzzled. "I'm sure of it." "Why?" The tavern patrons all turned to look at Takumi, who was sitting at the bar, calmly drinking. One man swallowed nervously and pointed at Takumi. "That kid. It couldn't be him, could it?" Ken looked over at Takumi and froze. "Huh? Yeah, that's him. It's him. What's he doing here?" "Well, looks like you're about to become famous," Law said with a smirk. Takumi coolly downed the rest of his second drink, unfazed by the attention. The entire tavern fell silent, everyone's eyes fixed on him. Takumi reached into his pocket. The entire room collectively held its breath. But Takumi simply pulled out another handful of belly and handed his empty gourd to the bartender. "Fill this with the same drink," he said, his tone indifferent. The bartender blinked in surprise before quickly taking the money and the gourd. Law couldn't help but chuckle softly. The tavern erupted in murmurs of doubt. "Is this really the kid you were talking about, Ken? Are you sure you're not mistaken? This kid doesn't seem that special, but I have to admit, he sure can hold his liquor." "You must be wrong, Ken. If this really were the kid, why would he go through all that trouble just to come here for a drink?" Actually, that's exactly why Takumi had come, to have a drink. Of course, Law was probably the only one there who knew that. The bartender quickly filled Takumi's gourd with the drink he had requested. Takumi hooked the gourd onto his waist and hopped down from the high stool, ready to leave the tavern. Seeing him leave, Law immediately followed. The other patrons watched them go, their expressions a mix of confusion and unease. After leaving the tavern, Takumi didn't linger in the town. He headed straight toward Wapple's castle. "So, you're really going to save that innkeeper?" Law asked, keeping pace beside Takumi. Takumi didn't respond. Law continued, "I thought you'd just let it go. You act so distant and uncaring, but you're actually much kinder than those who only talk big." Takumi thought to himself, exasperated. Has this guy completely misunderstood me? Sure, he could have ignored the innkeeper's plight. But the fact was, Takumi had paid a deposit when he checked into the inn. If the innkeeper were killed, who would refund him? It might only be a few dozen belly, but that was enough to buy several bottles of good liquor. Besides, during his 2-month stay at the inn, the innkeeper had been kind to him, often reminding him to be safe when he went out alone. Knowing Takumi liked to drink, the innkeeper had even given him some homemade liquor from time to time. All in all, the innkeeper was a decent person. Takumi had a clear sense of right and wrong. Given how well the innkeeper had treated him, he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. In the end, it was simply about repaying a favor. Where was the kindness in that? Wapple's castle was situated on a drum-shaped mountain. There were specific cable cars that provided access to the castle. As it happened, the king's guard was preparing to send supplies up the mountain when they spotted 2 kids approaching. One of the guards shouted at Takumi and Law, "This is no place for kids. Get lost." Takumi and Law didn't heed the guard's warning and kept walking toward the cable cars. The guard was about to scold them further when his companion tugged at his sleeve, glancing nervously at the swords and gourd hanging from Takumi's waist. "I think that's the kid Wapple's been looking for." "What?" The first guard took another look at Takumi and paled. "Yeah, I think you're right." "It's not think. He is the one you're looking for," Law said with a smirk. The 2 guards instinctively took a step back. Takumi couldn't be bothered to argue with them. He walked straight into the cable car heading up the mountain. Law followed close behind. The 2 guards exchanged uneasy glances before activating the cable car and signaling their comrades at the top of the mountain. When Takumi and Law reached the summit, they were met by a group of heavily armed guards. Standing at the front of the group was a man with a broad build, a square face, and a green coat. This man was Dalton. He was the captain of Drum Island's Royal Guard and a Zoan-type devil fruit user, specifically the Oxox fruit, which allowed him to transform into a bison-man hybrid. Takumi remembered Dalton as a good-hearted, straightforward man. Dalton had always despised Wapple's tyranny. Eventually, he would stand up against Wapple, only to be defeated and imprisoned. It wasn't until Wapple set sail that the villagers managed to free him. Later, with Luffy and the others' help in defeating Wapple, Dalton would be crowned king of the newly renamed Sakura Kingdom by the grateful citizens. But for now, Dalton was still under Wapple's thumb, forced to carry out orders despite his inner turmoil. Seeing that the 2 kids had emerged from the cable car, Dalton frowned and turned to his men. "Are you sure these kids are the ones you were told could be a threat to the kingdom?" Chapter 58. Chapter 58. Drum Island. "Don't worry, you're next." "Captain, the intel was spot on. This kid with the 2 swords is definitely a threat to the kingdom," one of Dalton's subordinates reported, standing at attention. "And what about the kid with the hat?" Dalton asked, gesturing towards Law. The soldiers all shook their heads, clearly clueless about Law's origins. Dalton remained silent for a moment. He didn't really want to apprehend Takumi and Law. After all, he hadn't seen Takumi's supposed powers firsthand and wasn't sure if the kid could really crush bullets with his bare hands. Wapple hadn't been king of Drum Kingdom for long, but he had already introduced a slew of unfair decrees that had made life miserable for the people. Anything or anyone that posed even a slight threat to Wapple was immediately targeted for elimination, no questions asked. Even if these kids had no intention of destroying Drum Island or opposing him, Wapple would still order them to be driven out or killed. "You 2 should leave," Dalton finally said, his voice tinged with reluctance. "Leave Drum Island right now, and I'll make sure that innkeeper stays safe." Law glanced over at Takumi, waiting for his reaction. Takumi remained silent and began walking forward. The surrounding soldiers quickly aimed their rifles at Takumi. Takumi ignored them and walked right past Dalton. Law chuckled and followed Takumi, matching his pace as they headed toward the castle in the distance. Dalton watched, stunned, as Takumi walked by him, turning to watch the 2 boys as they approached the castle. The soldiers kept their guns trained on Takumi and Law, maintaining a cautious distance of about 2 meters. When Takumi finally reached the castle gates, they swung open from within. Out stepped a rotund, ugly man with deep purple hair and a massive mouth. His jaw rested on a cylindrical chin guard, and he wore a white cape made of armor plates and tin. The man was seated atop a large, dim-witted creature known as Robson, a woolly hippo, surrounded by a throng of soldiers. This man was none other than Wapple, the tyrant king of Drum Island. Wapple, also known as White Iron, was a Paramecia-type devil fruit user with the powers of the Munch-Munch fruit. This fruit allowed him to eat anything and integrate whatever he consumed into his body or combine it into something new. He could even eat himself, slimming down after digesting his own body and spitting himself back out. In theory, the Munch-Munch fruit's abilities were incredibly powerful. But in the hands of someone as incompetent as Wapple, Those abilities were wasted. HM? What's this? 2 little brats? Wapol sneered, glaring down at Takumi and Law from his perch atop Robson. He couldn't be bothered to figure out which one was the threat. Ahahaha, doesn't matter who you are. You're here now, and you're not leaving. Wapol clapped his hands, and his soldiers dragged out the innkeeper, his hands bound behind his back. Listen up, kid. If you don't want this guy to die, you'd better stand there and not move a muscle, Wapol snarled. Soldiers, take out those 2 brats. Ahahaha. Once they're dead, there'll be no one left to challenge me in this kingdom. Ahaha. The innkeeper's eyes widened in panic when he saw Takumi had actually come. Kid, run. Don't worry about me. You're too young to die here. Takumi's expression remained cold as he locked eyes with Wapol. Wapol's soldiers quickly surrounded Takumi and Law, rifles trained on them. Law smirked, raising his hand to create a room that encompassed everyone around them. You don't need to lift a finger. I can handle these clowns, Law said, his voice confident. In the blink of an eye, he vanished. Wapol's soldiers blinked in shock. Huh? Where did that kid with the hat go? Did he just disappear? As the soldiers gaped in confusion, Law suddenly reappeared behind several of them. With a swift motion, he activated his technique, scalpel, and sliced off their arms and legs. My arms! My legs! One soldier screamed. I'm done for. I'm gonna die. Wait, I'm still alive? Oh god, he's a monster. That kid's a monster. Run for your lives. The remaining soldiers, those still intact, turned tail and ran in every direction. But they were still trapped within Law's room, and none of them could match his speed. Before any of them could escape the space, Law had already caught up, reducing the entire guard to a pile of dismembered yet living bodies. What the? Wapol's eyes bulged in shock. What kind of power is this? It's terrifying. Law chuckled darkly. Don't worry, you're next. Expanding his room, Law trapped Wapol within it. With another quick move, Law appeared right in front of the king. Wapol's face twisted in fear, but before he could even think to flee, Law had already sliced him into countless pieces. Your Majesty, are you all right? Wapol's remaining soldiers shouted, panicking. Law let out a small laugh and returned to Takumi's side. These worthless grunts were a joke. Takumi continued walking forward, ignoring the chaos behind him. Just then, Dalton, having transformed into a massive black bull using his ox fruit, blocked Takumi and Law's path. I don't want to fight you, Dalton said, his expression grim. But as the captain of the royal guard, I have a duty to protect the king, no matter how incompetent he may be. Leave this country now, or I'll have no choice but to stop you. Takumi didn't break his stride, not even acknowledging Dalton's words. Just as when they had come up the mountain, Takumi brushed past Dalton as if he weren't even there. As Takumi neared him, Dalton let out a roar, his reluctance giving way to duty, and charged at Takumi, hoping to knock him down with sheer force. But as Dalton closed in, Takumi easily dodged each of his attacks. When Takumi was within just a few meters of the innkeeper, and Dalton was still relentlessly attacking, Takumi finally made his move. With one swift strike, Takumi's hand connected with Dalton's chest, sending the guard captain flying back a dozen meters. The black coating of armament Haki slowly receded from Takumi's hand as he approached the soldiers holding the innkeeper. He didn't even need to say a word. Terrified, the soldiers' knees buckled, and they quickly released the rope binding the innkeeper, stumbling backward in fear. Takumi calmly untied the innkeeper. As the ropes fell away, the innkeeper's expression was a mix of awe and disbelief. Takumi, did you really just send Captain Dalton flying with a single hit? My god, is it true what they've been saying? Are you really that strong? Chapter 59. Chapter 59. Drum Island, a wasted power of the munch fruit. The innkeeper's shock did nothing to faze Takumi. The expressions on the faces of the Drum Kingdom's royal guard, however, grew more exaggerated by the second. What the hell is he doing? Law suddenly noticed that Wapol, who had been sliced into pieces just moments ago, was now eating his own dismembered body parts. A wave of disgust washed over him. So, this guy's a devil fruit user too? Gross. Takumi wasn't surprised at all. He had known about Wapol's abilities for a while now, so watching the tyrant devour himself didn't even raise an eyebrow. Wapol's a munch fruit user, the innkeeper said with concern. Anything he eats becomes a part of him. If he eats all the weapons around here, you guys are in real trouble. Takumi Law, you need to get out of here while you still can. Huh. None of you are going anywhere. Wapol, now slimmed down after consuming all his severed body parts, emerged from a large tin barrel. He quickly started snatching up the rifles scattered on the ground by his soldiers and began devouring them. Law frowned. His room was still active. In an instant, he reappeared right in front of Wapol, his blade poised to strike. But just as Law's sword was about to slice down Wapol, who had just swallowed a few guns, morphed them into a rocket launcher-like barrel protruding from his chest. At the last second, he fired a powerful shot, the bullet grazing Law's cheek as it zipped by. That shot could have taken Law out if his reflexes hadn't been so sharp. Damn it! Law cursed under his breath, tightening his grip on his sword as he continued to press the attack on Wapol. Wapol kept shoveling weapons into his mouth, and more gun barrels began sprouting from his body, spitting out an endless stream of bullets in every direction toward Law. Inside his room, Law had the advantage of near-instantaneous movement, but even then, getting close to Wapol was proving to be a challenge. Just then, several of Wapol's men rolled out a set of cannons from inside the castle. Wapol wasted no time jumping over to the cannons and started eating them one by one. "Heh, those two freaks are done for," one of the soldiers sneered. "Yeah, when King Wapol gets serious, he's unstoppable." "Ha ha ha, I almost feel bad for those brats. Should have run when they had the chance. Now it's too late." "Serves em right." The guards pushing the cannons taunted. Law had hoped to take Wapol down before he finished eating the cannons. But before he could close the distance, more gun barrels sprouted from Wapol's body, sending a barrage of bullets flying at him. Even with his room allowing for near-instant movement, the sheer number of bullets was overwhelming for Law, who still had limited experience in using his devil fruit powers in real combat. After all, he was only 14. Seeing that he couldn't dodge in time, Law quickly teleported to the edge of his room, narrowly avoiding the barrage. Meanwhile, Wapol finished devouring the cannons his men had brought out. Wiping his mouth, he shifted his gaze to Takumi, who stood just 5 meters away. "You little brat," Wapol snarled. "I'll deal with you first, then I'll finish off that hat-wearing punk." Wapol laughed maniacally, his soldiers joining in. Takumi stood there, expressionless, watching Wapol's body morph as he transformed his hands and head into rocket launchers, all aimed directly at him. "Die, you little pest!" Wapol cackled as he fired a volley of rockets at Takumi. The innkeeper, overwhelmed with fear, felt his legs give out beneath him as he collapsed to the ground, trembling. The only thought running through his mind was, "We're done for." Takumi, on the other hand, remained calm, watching the incoming barrage of missiles without a trace of concern. As the soldiers around them laughed hysterically, the missiles hit their target with a series of thunderous explosions, filling the air with thick smoke. Everyone, except Law, assumed Takumi and the innkeeper had been obliterated. From the distance, Dalton, who had just dragged himself out of the snow where Takumi had knocked him, turned to see the explosions. His face fell with a mix of sorrow and guilt. "Ha ha ha, that brat must be dead now. What a fool, just standing there as the missiles came flying at him. I bet he was too scared to move. Serves him right, the idiot. King Wapol, go ahead and take out that hat-wearing kid next. Maybe if you do, we'll get put back together." The soldiers began clamoring. Wapol grinned wickedly as he turned to face Law. "All right, kid, you're next. Ahahaha. Prepare to die." "Heh," Law suddenly chuckled. Wapol paused, frowning. "What are you laughing at?" Law's grin widened. "Did you really think that pathetic excuse for an attack could kill Takumi?" "What?" Wapol quickly looked back to where Takumi had been standing. The smoke from the explosion began to clear, revealing a glowing golden sphere in the midst of the destruction. "What the hell is that?" Wapol asked, bewildered. Takumi dismissed the fairy sphere, and as it vanished, he and the innkeeper were revealed to be completely unharmed. Everyone's jaws dropped. "What? They're okay? How's that possible? How did they survive King Wapol's attack? What was that golden sphere?" The soldiers' disbelief echoed through the air. Wapol, however, was seething with rage, his teeth grinding together as he stared down Takumi. "You little punk. Let's see how many more of my attacks you can dodge." Takumi rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. Before Wapol could fire off another volley, Takumi vanished, reappearing in front of the tyrant in a blink. Wapol barely had time to register what was happening before Takumi's foot slammed into his gut, shattering the gun barrels protruding from his stomach. With a single kick, Takumi sent Wapol soaring through the air in a perfect arc. "King Wapol!" the soldiers cried out in panic. "Your Majesty, we're coming." The few guards who hadn't been dismembered by Law sprinted off in the direction Wapol had flown. Takumi turned away without a second glance, heading back toward the cable car. As he passed the innkeeper, he said calmly, "Let's go." The innkeeper, still in a daze, scrambled to his feet and hurried after Takumi. Just as Law was about to leave, Dalton stepped in front of him, back in his human form. "I know this is asking a lot," Dalton began, his voice steady but pleading. "But my men were only following orders when they fought you. They didn't deserve this. Please, help restore them to their original state." Law glanced down at the scattered body parts of Dalton's soldiers, all still alive but in pieces. He smirked coldly. "Are you trying to tell me how to do my job?" Chapter 60. Chapter 60. Drum Island. Are you happy, kids? Ding. You've engaged Wapol, also known as White Iron, in battle and gained the favor of Captain Dalton. Sign in progress plus 20%. Current total progress. 70%. Reward. Iron body level plus 1. Current iron body level. LV3. As Takumi reached the edge of the cliff where the cable car was stationed, the system notification echoed in his mind. By now, he was more than accustomed to these sudden task completions. He didn't give it much thought and boarded the cable car without hesitation. The innkeeper followed closely behind, but Law didn't get on right away. Instead, he found himself blocked by Dalton, whose eyes were filled with sorrow. "I know. This country is beyond saving. No matter how much I despise Wapol's tyranny, as long as I'm the captain of the Royal Guard, I have to fulfill my duties," Dalton said with a heavy heart. "I know you don't owe us anything. We were enemies just moments ago, and there's no reason for you to restore my men." But they had no choice but to follow orders. "We are citizens of Drum Kingdom. If we don't obey the current king, Wapol, well, I don't care if I die, but my men's fate, I'm sure you can guess." Without waiting for a response, Dalton suddenly dropped to his knees in the snow. "Please, I'm begging you. Restore my men. You can kill me afterward if you want. I won't resist. Captain, you're kneeling to our enemy. You're too kind to us. Captain, please get up. Captain." Tears welled up in the eyes of the soldiers around them, and their sobs filled the air. Despite being grown men, they cried like children. Law's eyebrow twitched. He had no intention of helping at first, but their incessant sobbing was beginning to grate on his nerves. Meanwhile, the innkeeper, already on the cable car, chimed in on Dalton's behalf. "Dalton is nothing like Wapol. He's been good to us. Law, if you can help those men return to normal, you should. It's freezing on this cable car. Hurry up, would you?" "I'm fine, but I wouldn't want Takumi to catch a cold." Takumi. Honestly, with his resilience, it was nearly impossible for him to catch a cold from this breeze. Law remained silent for a moment before reluctantly helping Dalton to his feet. Though visibly annoyed, he still extended his hand and reactivated his room ability. With a swift motion, he used his powers to restore the dismembered soldiers to their original state. "Thank you, truly," Dalton said with deep gratitude. Law waved him off, not in the mood for small talk, and made his way to the cable car. Once he was on board, Dalton ordered his men to start the cable car, sending them down the mountain. As Takumi, Law, and the innkeeper descended, the innkeeper repeatedly expressed his thanks. Law occasionally responded, but Takumi remained silent, feeling there was nothing worth saying. As they passed by a treehouse, its door suddenly swung open. Out stepped an old woman, dressed in a white crop top, purple coat, and matching wide-legged pants. Her long hair was loose, her face lined with wrinkles, and her tall, slender frame exuded a certain vitality. She held a bottle of plum wine in one hand. Seeing the trio descending from the direction of Drum Peak, the woman took a swig from her bottle and flashed a toothy grin. He, are you kids happy?" "Who's that?" Law asked, puzzled by the unfamiliar figure. "It's the witch," the innkeeper stammered, beads of sweat forming on his brow. The old woman grinned wider. "Want to know the secret to my eternal youth?" The innkeeper quickly shook his head. "And no, I didn't ask." Takumi merely gazed at the so-called witch with a calm expression. He knew exactly who she was. This was Dr. Kureha, commonly known as the witch. At 129 years old, she was an exceptionally skilled doctor, though her fees were exorbitantly high. Kureha and the quack Dr. Hiralik were the only two who refused to leave Drum Island after Wapol issued his decree to hunt down and exile all doctors. Because of this, the two of them would be hunted by Wapol's men for years to come. Most importantly, after Hiralik's death, Kureha would become Chopper's mentor, passing on all her medical knowledge to him. Kureha's eyes flicked between Takumi and Law, eventually settling on the flask hanging from Takumi's waist. She chuckled and stroked her chin. "You must be the kid everyone's talking about, the one using some kind of strange sorcery to heal people?" Takumi nodded slightly. He, Kureha chuckled again, taking another swig of wine and wiping her mouth. Interesting. How about this, kid? I'll share with you the secret to my eternal youth if you tell me the secret behind that strange healing sorcery of yours. How's that sound? Takumi. Not interested. Law looked at the innkeeper with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Who exactly is this old woman? Kureha's ears twitched. Without warning, she pulled out a small scalpel and hurled it at Law. Law reflexively caught the tiny blade, surprised at its lightness. A scalpel? I'm only 129, Kureha replied with a sly smile. The innkeeper leaned in close to Law and whispered, She's Dr. Kureha. She's technically still a doctor here in Drum Kingdom. Her medical skills are top-notch, but her temper is, let's just say, unpredictable. She only treats patients when she's in the mood, and her fees are sky-high. That's why everyone calls her the witch. Is she really that good? Law asked, raising an eyebrow. The innkeeper nodded vigorously. She's the oldest doctor in our kingdom. They say her medical skills are practically divine. I'm only in my 120s, Kureha interjected, tossing another scalpel, this time at the innkeeper. The innkeeper jumped, his nerves getting the better of him. The scalpel should have just grazed his face, but as he stumbled to avoid it, the blade came dangerously close to his forehead. Ah! The innkeeper yelped. Law moved quickly, snatching the scalpel out of the air just before it could cut the innkeeper. He, you're one lucky fellow, Kureha chuckled, taking another swig. At that moment, a rough voice called out, Kureha, I've just developed a new miracle drug. A man appeared, walking briskly through the snow. He was clad in a green sweater and black coat, with a tall black top hat perched on his head. He carried a black briefcase adorned with a skull and crossbones. The man stopped in his tracks upon seeing the three newcomers at Kureha's treehouse. His gaze quickly zeroed in on the innkeeper. With an eager expression, he fished out a small vial of bubbling green liquid from his briefcase and dashed over. Isn't that Mr. Bach? I heard you get colds a lot. I just developed this miracle cure. Why don't you drink it now and see how it makes you feel? And no. Stay away from me. Bach protested, his face paling as he backed away frantically. I don't want to die. Just stay away.